Hello, and welcome to the Let's Beat Breast Cancer Summit. Today, you'll hear from doctors, experts, influencers, and advocates who want to help you do everything you can to reduce your risk for breast cancer. At the end of the summit, I'll be joined by Dr. Kristi Funk to answer your questions, so make sure to put them in the chat as we go. The Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign consists of a four-pronged approach for reducing the risk of getting breast cancer or having a recurrence, but these lifestyle changes will improve other aspects of your health too. They can help reduce your risk for other cancers, heart disease, diabetes, and just make you feel great. The 4 steps we'll cover today are choose plant-based foods, exercise regularly, limit alcohol, and maintain a healthy weight. I'm so excited to kick things off with Dr. Kristi Funk, who will discuss the power of a plant-based diet for breast cancer risk reduction. Dr. Funk is a board-certified breast cancer surgeon and physician, best-selling author, international keynote speaker, women's health advocate, and partner in the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign.
Hi, everyone. Dr. Kristi Funk here. Hey, I have an idea. Let's beat breast cancer. All right. So first, I want to give you a little bit of the landscape of exactly what's going on in the United States with breast cancer. Currently, there are 3.8 million breast cancer survivors and thrivers who either currently have or have had breast cancer. But over 2 million women have died since 1970. So we still have much work to do regarding this disease, as evidenced by the fact that 268,600 invasive breast cancers will be diagnosed this year, and nearly 42,000 women will die. The top 3 risk factors over which you can do absolutely nothing are as follows. Being female, so 1 in 8 women will get breast cancer as opposed to 1.3 out of every 100,000 men. So certainly being a woman is your biggest risk factor, followed closely by age. It turns out that the median age in the United States is 62. So half of women are 62 or older, and the other half of women diagnosed are under 62. And finally, family history. What is it about family history that has all of us doctors so incredibly interested in learning more? Really, it has to do with the chances that you might carry an inherited genetic mutation, such as BRCA or CHEK2 or PALB2. But how often does that account for someone getting breast cancer or being at risk for it? What percentage of breast cancer can be attributed to an inherited genetic mutation such as BRCA? Is it 5 to 10%, 30 to 40%, 60 to 70%, or 80 to 90%? Whenever I was in college and I had to take a test like this, and I didn't know the answer, I always trended toward the second one. Statistically, it just tends to be right. But if you did that, you'd be wrong. It's 5 to 10%. So think about that. Only 5 to 10% of all breast cancer can be attributed to an inherited mutation that puts you at incredibly high risk. So, if that's actually true, what do you think the answer to this question is? What percentage of women with breast cancer have no first-degree relatives with breast cancer? 16%, 45%, 61%, 87%. If in fact, the vast majority of breast cancer is not coming from gene mutations, then boom, this would be the correct answer. 87% of women newly diagnosed with breast cancer don't have any first-degree relatives with breast cancer. In fact, 80% don't have any at all. So if we can't blame our genetics, and I would give a solid maybe 5% of breast cancers to inexplicable things. We just don't understand. This woman seems to have done everything right her whole life. She's super fit. She's going to follow all the lifestyle advice we're going to detail out over the next several minutes. And yet she still gets breast cancer. It is an outlier story. It tends to be overemphasized, I think, in certain media when you get surprised by someone who's fit and healthy getting breast cancer. It happens for sure, and it's not as readily explicable as the vast majority. And that's the point I want to make. We've got 5 to 10% inherited genetic mutations, maybe 5% just really hard to understand and explain. But the big fat middle of our bell curve here is an absolute solid 80, if not up to 90% of all breast cancer coming from what exactly? If we can't blame genetics and we don't understand the fate. Well, here's an idea to give you a hint. If you look at Japanese immigrants in Los Angeles and Hawaii after 1982, and then the Chinese in Hawaii after 1992, what you will see is that they develop breast cancer at rates over 100% higher than Japanese and Chinese still in the homeland, even just one generation later. And what was going on in the homeland? Well, between 1990 and 2000, while the US death rate from breast cancer dropped by 15%, it actually skyrocketed in Japan by 55%. So what happened? Beginning in the 1970s, okay, I say 70s because breast cancer isn't like a sunburn. It isn't like you walked outside, some sort of carcinogen hit you, and boom, that evening you have breast cancer. It's got inherently different division rates based on which subtype of cancer you might have, but all cancer had the first cell turn awry at least 5 years ago, and for some of the slower growing ones, maybe 15 plus years ago. So we have to back up in Japan, in urban areas of China and Singapore, and say what was happening in the 70s and early 80s that made this mortality spike. And the answer is that this increased affluence during those decades sparked westernized changes in their lifestyle. They started to chase our culture, and as a result, Asians caught our cancer. So what is it about our awesome American style that they caught exactly? Basically, instead of laboring all day in the home, tending to children and preparing fresh meals, women around the world started entering the workforce in droves, leading stressful and sedentary lives that expanded their waistlines, delayed childbearing until later years, a risk factor, if at all, another risk factor, not breastfeeding, another risk factor, eating leftover pizza for lunch while sending off an email stat, and then dashing home just in time to put takeout on the table, pour a glass of wine, and catch a favorite Netflix binge. Of all these controllable, changeable factors that are proven to elevate breast cancer risk in the science, diet and nutrition, alcohol, exercise, obesity, hormone replacement therapy, environmental toxicities, and emotional stress, there is one thing that, in my heavily researched opinion, is more important than any other, and you do it 3 to 6 times a day. You eat. The key to using food to protect yourself from breast cancer is to understand that every time you chew and swallow, you unleash weapons, for better or worse, that hold the power to alter the following factors inside of you. Estrogen levels. 80% of all breast cancer is fed and fueled by estrogen, so less of it is better. Growth factors, particularly IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor 1, blood vessel formation, angio blood vessel genesis, birth, the birth of new blood flow. Every cancer in our bodies requires angiogenesis to take place if that cancer plans to grow beyond the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen. Food alters inflammation, free radical formation, which ultimately ends up with DNA damage and immune system dysfunction or function, right? So every time, whatever's at the end of that fork has the power to alter these factors and to lower estrogen levels, lower IGF-1, stop angiogenesis, reduce inflammation, squelch free radical formation, and boost immune system function is the end game that you're after. So what should be at the end of that fork so that when you chew and swallow, the chemicals that end up coursing through your veins around in your bloodstream, bathing those cells, the tumor's microenvironment, so to speak. It's like a little bathtub that these cells will sit in, and the fluids and cells that bathe, support, and fuel the cell is literally either going to stoke cancer or choke cancer. And you choose every time you eat. I want you to understand a little bit about the battleground inside of us called oxidative stress. It happens every time we finish a meal. Free radicals, they're actually useful. For example, they help us breathe, they combat infection, and they can actually kill the cancers that they helped cause, which is ironic, but also useful. If more bad free radicals hang out than there is good to stop it, then oxidative stress results. And when that imbalance persists day after day, year after year, your body cells and DNA simply just get too beat up. And whatever it is that these free radicals injure the most frequently determines what disease you might get. Sickness results, say, if it's in your blood vessels, hello, heart disease. If it's in your muscles, you become chronically fatigued or have fibromyalgia. If it's in your brain, Alzheimer's, dementia. And if it's in your breast, well, so what can squelch this oxidant activity, these free radicals? It's antioxidants, of course. Let me give you one study example of how powerful antioxidants can be. This was a human study taking 24 hyperlipidemic men and women, so they had high cholesterol levels, and they measured oxidized LDL cholesterol hourly after a meal as a marker of that oxidative stress, all right? So here we are at the beginning, and they are given a standard American diet to eat, a SAD meal. And what we see, so we're talking pancakes and bacon, steak and eggs. And so hour by hour, we've got 3 hours later, and the oxidative stress level, the LDL oxidized cholesterol goes up, 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 lunch, hamburger and fries. Now we measure again, up, 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 dinner, and so on. So these people, they're going to bed with fewer antioxidants in their bloodstream than when they woke up. But look what happens. Same people, next day, same SAD meal, one change. A cup of strawberries. After eating 3 hours later, LDL goes down, down, down below baseline. Now we have a hamburger and fries and 1 cup of strawberries. And boop, we've met our match now. Is like, enough with the burger, will you? But it still doesn't go rising up to the level it was without the strawberries. Look at the power of antioxidants within a mere cup of strawberries to combat all of the oxidative stress that animal protein laden meal causes. What would have happened then if the meal itself had already been plant-based awesomeness? What if it had been steel-cut oats with a cup of berries and some flax seeds and cinnamon on top? Well, then these chemicals that go in your bloodstream would squelch the oxidative stress so immediately, you'd be building up health. You could actually slow, stop, or beep, 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 reverse illness that's happening in your body. You could melt away plaque in arteries. You could melt away pounds from a waistline. You could stop cancer cells from propagating. These chemicals, I term them plant warfare because they're phytonutrients, which sounds much healthier than phytochemicals, but they are the same. And what I love about plants is that they do break down into these very like biochemistry looking molecules that we doctors had to study and memorize and regurgitate throughout medical school in our chemistry classes. And I just love how the science just fits right in. It makes perfect sense when you start to understand that you get these chemicals in your body that can flip genetic switches to enhance your own health. So here are some examples: the curcumin in turmeric, the epigallocatechin gallate EGCG in green tea, the resveratrol in the skin of red grapes or in red wine, the omega-3 fatty acids in flax seeds and avocado, the procyanidins in berries, the genistein in soy, the lycopene in tomatoes, the anthocyanidins in apples, and the limonene. You'd think it'd be mostly in a lemon or a lime based on that word, but nope. It is, but it's more highly concentrated in oranges. So you can start to understand, if you don't already, how there are chemicals released from the foods we chew and swallow. And these chemicals are either oxidants or antioxidants. And plants have 64 times the antioxidant content of all animal products. So I'm about to give you my top 12 breast superfoods that I try to consume on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, I always get these first top 3. Number 1, soy. Has anyone ever told you to spit that miso out of your mouth? If it were I'm very sorry about that, because for 18 years, I thought that soy, the isoflavones, which are estrogen lookalikes, could feed and fuel a breast cancer. Remember, I mentioned 80% of all breast cancers are fueled by estrogen. So I was like, how much do you like soy? You can't have that tofu. I'm sorry about that. I was embarrassingly wrong when I leapt into the soy science to prove with facts that my stance was correct. In fact, the facts show soy to be quite the opposite, anti-estrogenic and anti-carcinogenic, so much so that high versus low consumers in every single human study published since 2009, which is when the human studies poured in, looking at soy and the breast cancer connection, every study shows a drop between 25 and 60% in breast cancer occurrence, recurrence, or death for high versus low soy consumers. And the early in life, the bigger the drop. So soy it up, sisters. Breast superfood numero dos, cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and our leafy greens. The magical compounds in these are isothiocyanates, which transform when you chew the raw or lightly steamed vegetable, transforms into something called sulforaphane, which has the power to seek out and destroy cancer cells. A study following 52,000 African-American women for 12 years analyzed food consumption and found that for those consuming more than 6 servings of cruciferous vegetables weekly, there was a 41% drop in breast cancer. Superfood number 3, flax seeds. So flax is the most concentrated source of healthy omega-3 fats on the planet, but that's not why I love it for its anti-breast cancer virtues. It has to do with the lignin content. It has 100 to 800 times the lignin content of any other food. And lignans exhibit all kinds of anti-cancer virtues related to lowering estrogen levels and stopping cancer growth. In fact, in one study, 300 breast cancer patients were followed for 23 years. And those with the highest versus lowest lignin content in their blood at the time of their breast cancer surgery 23 years earlier had 58% less breast cancer death at the 5-year mark, 33% less at the 10-year mark, and even 20 years later, they had 17% less death. So lignans, 2 tablespoons of ground flax seeds every day, at least 1, I get to. Superfood number 4 is not a food in and of itself per se, but fiber from your beans and greens and berries. I want you to strive to get 30 grams of fiber every day, which 3% of Americans do. You sisters, and I'm sure there are a few good men out there, you sisters and brothers, we are all going to get 30 plus grams a day to enjoy a 40% drop in breast cancer. High fiber makes you, well, it binds estrogen in your GI tract. It makes you poop it out, but it does a lot more than that too. It's like the favorite food of your microbiome. It's the prebiotic for those bacteria, which then release a litany of antioxidant vitamins and anti-cancer compounds, including more lignans, isoflavones, and phytate. High fiber has actually been shown to even decrease our most difficult to treat and cure subtype of breast cancer, triple negative. Here are some good food sources for fiber. A cup of black beans, lentils, and split peas has 15 grams, a medium avocado, 13 grams, 1 cup of berries, 8 grams, pearled barley, 1 cup, 6 grams, and a cup of broccoli. Oop, there's your 2 for 1. You're getting 2 superfoods with 1 cup of broccoli. Next up, berries. They interfere with cancer cell signals and encourage cancer cell suicide called apoptosis, and they inhibit angiogenesis. Remember that ever important blood flow that cancer cells bring to themselves. And the berriest berry of them all is the Indian gooseberry, which is not at all available in the United States. So we can consume it in its powdered form called amla. In fact, Pink Lotus Elements sells a very high quality amla called Amla Boss, which I highly recommend. Next superfood, apples. Daily apple eaters not apple pie, have 24% less breast cancer than those eating fewer apples. And it's extracts from the peel that have been shown to stop cancer cells in the lab 10 times more effectively than from the flesh of the exact same apples. So eat your apples whole or blended, but not juiced. Superfood. Where are we actually? Number 7, tomatoes. Lycopene is the anti-inflammatory, anti-angiogenic marvel in our tomatoes. And guess what? Unlike many foods whose magical enzymes that create the phytonutrients that we need are destroyed by heat and cooking, it's the opposite for the tomato. So you want to be heating it for about 15 minutes and you will increase the lycopene bioavailability by 300%. Next, it's not a fruit or a vegetable, it's fungus. It is a mushroom. And guess what mushroom subtype has the most estrogen lowering capability? Is it the fancy portobello or chanterelle? No. Well, you probably are guessing it because I got a picture of it right there. It's the cheapy white button. A daily intake of 10 grams, the equivalent of half a button mushroom, dropped breast cancer rates in Chinese women by 64% compared with age-matched no mushroom eaters. The allium vegetables, garlic, onions, leeks, shallots, chives, scallions, the allium vegetables, by the way, are also, they do have an enzyme destroyed by heat. So you can cook them, but then make sure you always add back in some completely raw chopped onion or leeks to put the enzyme back in action so you get the magic. And what that magic will do? Well, in a French study that looked at women who were consuming 11 to 12 servings of allium vegetables weekly had a 75% drop in breast cancer occurrence. Next up, seaweed. A Korean study showed that daily consumption of gim, which is like a sheet of nori, you know, the black seaweed wrap around sushi, dropped breast cancer by over 50%. Spice it up, turmeric and other spices, but particularly curcumin. Human blood samples were exposed to free radicals in a lab 1 week, all right? And then everybody went away and they came back a week later and they took more blood and they exposed that new blood to free radicals, and there was half the oxidative DNA damage. Well, what happened during that week? What did those people do? All they did was consume literally a pinch of turmeric daily. My final 12th superfood, finally something sweet, consuming 1.5 ounces or 40 grams of more than 70% cacao. Solid dark chocolate gets an anti-cancer thumbs up as it delivers more antioxidants than it does cocoa fat and sugar. One delicious, nutritious way to consume almost all, let's see, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the 12 superfoods are all found in my smoothie with optional add-ins for more anti-cancer awesomeness: allotonic, matcha green tea, that EGCG I mentioned earlier, and amla bas if you want the Indian gooseberry. Please get the recipe, pinklotus.com/smoothie if you've already signed up for the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign and got your digital e-cookbook. The recipe's in there as well. But I find that the smoothie is a nice way, because sometimes I'll be like, I don't have the smoothie for breakfast, and then I'll have eaten a rice bowl or something, and I'm all, oh, I could have put the turmeric on my rice, but I didn't, and now I haven't had turmeric today. So I just kind of like downing this antioxidant awesomeness and feel pretty good about myself for the rest of the day. All right, here's a drink that is not my smoothie. It's alcohol, and you should avoid it. Why? Because it increases estrogen levels, and we've implicated estrogen as a bad actor in this breast cancer story. It forms a potent carcinogen, acetaldehyde, in your mouth, and then you get more when you swallow it down. It impairs immune function, and remember, at the end of the day, it's your immune system that's got to seek out and destroy these cancer cells. And it inactivates the conversion of folic acid or folate from your leafy greens into its active form, methylfolate, which babysits DNA as it divides to make sure that it maintains its true form and doesn't morph into cancer. The US defines one drink as 14 grams of alcohol. That's 12 ounces of beer equals 5 ounces of wine equals 1.5 5 ounces of hard liquor. For every drink you have per day, breast cancer risk goes up by about 7% for premenopausal women and 13% for postmenopausal. Next lifestyle risk factor for breast cancer is being too chubby. It's quite possible you're one of the 72.2% of Americans who is overweight or obese. But if you're not sure, you can check your body mass index with our handy dandy calculator at pinklotus.com/BMI, body mass index. You just plug in your height and weight and it'll give you your number. A body mass index between 18.5 and 24.9 is considered ideal. Over that, you are either overweight, obese, or morbidly obese. And that is a problem because there is no question and no controversy within the literature that obese women have between 50 and 250% more breast cancer recurrence, and more breast cancer related death than non-obese women. But cue the good news, you lose the weight, you lose the risk. Our final lifestyle habit that helps influence breast cancer is exercise. It works by decreasing estrogen levels, so we take away 80% of all breast cancer's favorite fuel. It enhances fat metabolism, which can aid in weight loss or weight maintenance. And it lowers that letter factory of inflammatory markers like CRP, C-reactive protein, IL-6, IL-8, these are the interleukins, and other inflammatory markers. And it strengthens your immune system so it can more effectively identify and destroy cancer cells. And if you're not very active right now, don't sweat it. Literally, you can just briskly walk. This study followed 17,000 postmenopausal women and found that briskly walking nearly 11 minutes a day dropped breast cancer by 18%. So start low and go slow if you must, and work your way up every few days, adding some more minutes until finally you can reach the goal of 5 hours of walking weekly. And then when that's easy for you, put a little pep in your step, start to jog, or maybe add activities that you enjoy, such as swimming, biking, running, hiking, tennis. So here it is, folks, my Let's Beat Breast Cancer checklist. Number 1, eat a whole food plant-based diet that prioritizes vegetables, fruits, 100% whole grains, and legumes like beans, peas, and lentils. Eat whole food soy, ground flaxseed, and eliminate all meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs. Minimize saturated fat, simple sugars, processed foods, and refined cereals. I will say, if I meet a much too chubby vegan who has been whole food plant-based for a couple of years now, he or she generally has a little bit too much of this last bit of food with saturated fats, simple sugars, processed foods, refined cereals, too much bagels and white bread and things like that. Next, exercise. Your goals are 5 hours a week for moderate effort, if you can chit chat with your friend, or 2.5 hours a week of vigorous, super sweaty, I can't talk to you right now workouts. Minimize or eliminate alcohol. And finally, lose excess weight. Keep your body mass index below 25. If you haven't already, go to letsbeatbreastcancer.org and sign up for our challenge this year and join us as we encourage you to eat a whole food plant-based diet, exercise regularly, minimize alcohol, and maintain a healthy weight so you can beat breast cancer. I'll see you at the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Dr. Funk. Now we'll hear from Dr. Paulette Chandler, a primary care physician and cancer epidemiologist with a focus on preventive medicine. She's joined by one of her patients, Hadassah Bulgin, and registered dietitian Karen Smith. Dr. Chandler will talk about how she integrates a whole food plant-based diet into her practice and how Hadassah has embraced a plant-based diet as part of her strategy for breast cancer recovery.
Dr. Chandler, what can you tell us about how nutrition can increase or decrease breast cancer risk?
Well, nutrition is one of the cornerstone strategies of preventing breast cancer because we, as you know, the old saying goes, you are what you eat or you are what you digest. So when we think about food, we want to think of it as one component of the strategies, of the multiple strategies that can be used to prevent breast cancer. For example, we know that fiber-rich foods reduce the risk of breast cancer by over 20%. And we also know that cruciferous vegetables like broccoli and cauliflower, cabbage, those cruciferous vegetables help prevent breast cancer also. There've been beautiful, cohort studies that have shown reduction in breast cancer just through increasing fruit and vegetable intake. And prevention starts early. We know that obesity is a big risk factor for breast cancer that occurs after menopause. So one of the strategies for preventing weight gain is through having more fruits and vegetables in the diet on the plate rather than higher calorie foods like meat or cheese or other foods that come loaded with calories.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. So you mentioned fiber and increasing fruit and vegetable intake as being an important strategy for reducing risk. What foods can increase your risk if consumed in large quantities?
Well, you think about foods that increase the risk of being overweight. For example, foods, sugar-sweetened beverages, fried foods, and foods that come with a lot of fat that will increase the likelihood of gaining weight over time. So if we're thinking about maintaining a healthy weight, because that's one of the key strategies for preventing breast cancer, and we know that there are other cancers that are associated with obesity too, then a plant-based diet is one sure way of helping prevent weight gain. And we know from epidemiologic studies that people that are on a plant-based diet are less likely to be obese, or people that consume fewer processed foods are less likely to be obese.
Yeah, and you've talked a few times about prevention being key. So ideally, how soon in life should women be thinking about their dietary pattern and how it influences their risk for breast cancer?
Yeah. Well, as many epidemiologists highlight through their work looking at diet across the life course trajectory, prevention starts in childhood. And Graham Colditz has beautiful work looking at dietary patterns in children and then looking at their risk for developing benign breast disease, which is a risk factor for breast cancer. And their key components that he's identified, those children that consume fewer animal proteins have a lower risk of developing benign breast disease. Those children that have higher fruit and vegetable intake have lower risk of developing benign breast disease, which of course is a risk factor for breast cancer. So those early childhood exposures are crucial, and they also influence the growth trajectory. Kids that have, grow at a higher velocity or, gain height at more rapidly than others are at increased risk for breast cancer. And higher height is associated with increased risk for breast cancer. So prevention starts early, and it's a wonderful thing for parents to start thinking, how can I help my children develop healthy lifestyles across the trajectory of life? And the beauty of following a diet that prevents breast cancer, those same healthy eating habits help prevent cardiovascular disease. And we know that cardiovascular disease is the number one killer. So when you think about what diet should I eat to prevent breast cancer, just think, oh, what should I do to prevent heart disease? And it's the same lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Same one that reduces diabetes risk and Alzheimer's risk as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. So Hadassah, it's so great to have you joining us. What can you share with us about your diet before your breast cancer diagnosis and your diet after?
So, it's a really interesting question. And honestly, my journey, it's pretty interesting because I will tell you, back in 2007, I had gone to a wellness center and I saw and I heard information about how plant-based food could actually help to reverse cancer and could also be preventative. And so back in 2007, I decided to actually switch to a plant-based diet. So I had been on a plant-based diet up until my diagnosis of 2018, but please note, even after that, I did maintain the plant-based diet. Now, I did that because honestly, the one thing I did not want to get, believe it or not, was cancer. So when I was diagnosed with it on 2018, I was pretty, as you can imagine, just very surprised and just wasn't sure how to think about it, how to process it. There's just a whole confluence of just emotions really that I was dealing with. And It was 10 days after my mom had passed, with my last living parent, that I had actually noticed the lump underneath my armpit. And so it's just, so I'm dealing with the grief, dealing with everything. But one of the things that I did hold on to, because of what I learned at this wellness center back in 2007, I did know that the food was going to make a difference. And so there, even more so now, we hear about how plant-based diets are really helpful, but it is really important to understand the distinction between plant-based and whole foods plant-based. So while I was plant-based, certainly it wasn't all of the time whole foods, right? And so I didn't realize about the power of the cruciferous vegetables that Dr. Chandler just talked about. So while I ate broccoli, I certainly wasn't eating a lot of cabbage. I wasn't eating a lot of Brussels sprouts because those are not my favorite ones. So I will tell you though, after the diagnosis, those are things I started to incorporate more into my diet. Now, the other thing that, I was being counseled even before I got diagnosed was my consumption of soy. And so I had actually stopped doing more soy. Now, when we looked at my diagnosis, it actually was not just one breast, it was actually in both breasts. So I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer. And because of my age, they were just very surprised that it was in both breasts. So we ended up doing genetic testing and we discovered that I had the BRCA2 gene. Now, that also came as a complete surprise because I didn't have breast cancer in my family history at all. So even though I had heard about the BRCA situation, honestly, because I thought I was on this plant-based diet, this is still going to really help to mitigate, right? This popping up in my life. I knew it wasn't going to be a sure, foolproof, strategy, but I knew it was certainly going to help. So because nothing's ever for 100% sure, right? But we do know that the science that's out there, it certainly is 100% helpful. And so with the soy, I started listening more to some of Dr. Greger's nutrition facts information. And I actually started reading his book, How Not to Die from Cancer. And he's got a section on breast cancer. And he actually talks about soy and breast cancer and about how soy can actually turn on the BRCA gene so that it does what it's supposed to do in terms of suppressing the cancer. And so once I realized that, I started to put soy back into my diet. Certainly wanted to be temperate, right? Because you have to do everything in moderation. But I did start to include that more into my diet. And so that's how foods have been used. I will also say, because I knew I needed to get as much whole foods into my diet, and it'll be interesting to hear if Dr. Chandler has something to talk about this. I started doing a lot more juicing. So we were juicing a lot of greens, so a lot of cruciferous vegetables, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to eat, 50 pounds of Brussels sprouts or what have you. And so we did a lot of juicing. And so we were juicing at least 2 gallons a day. And I'll tell you, the saints at my church, they were called the Juicers for Jesus, and they would come to my house 3 times a week and they just juiced. And so I had at least 64 ounces of juice every single day. And the thought was to really try to help infuse the nutrients into the body that I'm just not going to be able to eat all at once. And so all of that absolutely helped to sustain my body. It helped to sustain my energy. And in fact, I think when I went to the doctor, and we looked at all my blood work and things like that, they were like, you're really healthy except for the cancer. And it's just like, and I credit that really to, again, embracing what I had learned about the plant-based diet and how powerful it can be. So yes, it didn't stave it off completely, but you know what? I do believe I'm in a much better place because I have stuck to that diet and I continue to hold fast to that. And I am adding in a lot more whole foods, plant-based. In fact, I'm pretty much all there. But yeah, so that's my story.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds like, early on in your diagnosis, you were really focusing on your calories coming from high nutrient dense foods. And, sometimes people with cancer, I find, are told, just to get enough calories, maybe your appetite isn't so great. And so just getting in calories and not necessarily focusing on the quality of them is something that I've heard. So Dr. Chandler, I'm wondering, are there any supplements that can help reduce breast cancer risk? And is it possible to consume the same compounds in adequate quantities from foods alone?
Yeah, there haven't been, great studies to show that, oh, this supplement prevents breast cancer. What we do know is that vitamin D reduces the risk of death from advanced cancer. And that's from the vitamin D and omega-3 fatty acid trial that looked at vitamin D supplementation at 2,000 international units a day. And omega-3 fatty acids were in that study too. However, we did not see a reduction in incidence with breast cancer or other cancers within that study. So I would say ensure that you're getting adequate vitamin D. And of course, we make vitamin D through the sun. The sun hits our skin and we produce vitamin D. However, if we're indoors or we're at northern latitudes, we may need to supplement with vitamin D. Now, remember, when the Industrial Revolution happened, that's when they decided that, well, we probably should supplement with vitamin D because they were seeing a lot of kids with rickets. Mothers were dying in childbirth from fractures of the pelvic bone as they were trying to deliver kids. So they opted to add vitamin D to a commonly consumed food source, which happened to be milk. So they said, where can we add this vitamin D? And they also added vitamin A to a source that people will readily get it. And so vitamin D was added to milk. So now a cup of milk has, 100 international units of vitamin D. However, to get up to, a decent range, most people need about 800 to 1,000 international units. So if we want to make sure that we get adequate vitamin D, get outside, get sun, but be careful because sun is a friend and a foe. But also think about supplementing because that is one supplement that may be beneficial, especially since it's already being added to the food supply. It's naturally added to our food supply in terms of it was, organized, the government organized to have it added to milk. The other supplement to think about is vitamin B12. We know that many people are deficient with vitamin B12, so that's another important one because that can cause damage to, if you're deficient with vitamin B12, you can get damage to the nerves and there can be long-term damage. So can you get vitamin D from foods? Yes. Irradiated mushrooms have vitamin D. And of course, vitamin D is added to things like orange juice and other food sources. The sun is the natural way to get it.
Yeah, thank you. So it sounds like relying on food for the majority of your nutrients is most important. And, plants are packed full of compounds, antioxidants, phytochemicals that really you just can't extract and get the same reactions occurring in your body as you do when you eat the food.
That's true. It's important to have, as I say, eat the rainbow each day. Have a wide variety of colors on the plate. Make sure that you're going for foods as simply prepared as possible in terms of, avoiding the processing that might go as something goes into a can or something goes into a box.
Yeah. So, Dr. Chandler, what led to your interest in plant-based nutrition and cancer?
Well, my interest stemmed from my father being diagnosed with mesothelioma when I was a teenager. And of course, at that time, they really didn't have options. So I started reading and I came across a beautiful article called Physician Heal Thyself by Anthony Santalario, who was a physician in Philadelphia area. And he had metastatic prostate cancer. He was driving along. He picked up some hitchhikers and they said, "Man, you look down." And he said, "Yeah, I have metastatic prostate cancer." They said, "Well, haven't you heard about diet?" So they told him about how diet could reverse his prostate cancer. He started reading like crazy, changed his diet, went plant-based, and his doctors were surprised. They did imaging, repeat imaging after a few years, and he no longer had metastatic disease in his bones. And he wrote a cancer manifesto, and he remained cancer-free for over 10 years. And then he decided to go back and say, well, is it really the diet that's working or is it something else? And then he, had a recurrence and actually died of prostate cancer. So that story really inspired me on my journey of looking at diet, the connection between diet and cancer. My father did die 3 months later, but he was very willing to embrace the journey. And I learned so much in helping him embrace a plant-based diet. And of course, my church really strongly promotes a plant-based diet too. So that's been very inspirational. And my mother always loved the connection between nutrition and health. And when my father got sick, we got even, more informed about that connection.
Wow. Also, it sounds like you have a community supporting you, and Hadassah, you have a community supporting you as well. So, Hadassah, how have you gotten involved with others in sharing all this wonderful information that you've learned?
I mean, it's a good question. I will tell you because I was just so conflicted after getting diagnosed, and I had always been a proponent of, you know, plant-based diet. Plant-based diet, it's just really healthy and it's just going to help you to stave off disease. And then getting diagnosed, it was hard to even really talk about it. And to be honest, you know, I didn't share diagnosis with my church. I just didn't, because I knew I needed to guard my mind, and I knew I needed to stay focused, but I also knew that really the prayers of the saints, right? It really does make a difference. And so, so we wanted to at least share with our church that, you know, I was going through this, or we, as the family, right, was going through this particular situation, but they didn't know what it was. But we just said, "Can you please pray?" And so I'll tell you, the church just rallied. We had nurses that came over once a month because I decided to go to a naturopath. So I decided to do a natural route for treatment. So I did not do I did not do surgery. I did not do chemo, and I did not do radiation. And so I was trying to utilize, you know, natural methods as much as possible. But I also knew that I needed to make sure that I was staying focused. And so, you know, the nurses came in once a month to help with those supplements. And then we also were using other things like poultices to be able to apply over the breast to help to be able to either castor oil, which is known to be able to break down lumps and things like that. So we used castor oil poultices as well as charcoal poultices, which is known to be able to pull things out. So in terms of being able to have the church being engaged, you know, our church is really well set up now to really be able to provide these types of services to really people within our community, and being able to help promote, again, the plant-based diet, as well as, you know, the juicing and how you're able to get in, again, all of the nutrients and so forth. Now, I do feel like I do have a story to share. And so, you know, this is really my first time really talking about it publicly, because I do feel impressed that, you know, it is time to share. And so some of the things that I've started to do this year is really trying to get to the community, helping them to understand that there are different options. There are different paths available for healing. You know, certainly for cancer, but even just all sorts of healing. And so I've teamed up with an organization called the New England North Adventist Youth Federation, where they had started a broadcast every other week. They started that during the pandemic. And so what we asked is, can we just maybe get one day a quarter where we can do different programs? And so our first program aired in May, and that was to highlight Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we had a nutritional psychiatrist on that could talk about how foods can actually help or exacerbate their mental health. And so, you know, really excited about it. Now, one of the things in her book, though, she talks about how she herself was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she talked about how she utilized foods to be able to help moderate the effects from the chemo and the radiation, and even to help build her body back up from the surgery. And so really excited. We just had a program just last week on October 16. So I'd love to encourage you guys to check out the YouTube. We had her come on the show. She talked about her journey with breast cancer, and she also talked about the foods to help with the breast cancer. Now, October is also Depression Awareness Month. And so with that, we talked about the different emotional and mental challenges that are coming into play. And so we got a chance to talk more about her book and about the foods that can be used to help with mental depression and anxiety. And we also had another woman on who I know PCRM actually did an article on, Donna Green Goodman. And so she also talked about her journey and about how food was used as her overall healing. And so she's now 25 years cancer-free, right? Because she's utilized these processes. And so that's one of the ways that I've been trying to be able to give back and trying to be able to share with others about, hey, you know, there are many ways to be able to heal yourself. There's not just one way. We're all different. And so that means the way that that you treat yourself and you heal yourself is likely going to be different. Now, there are some things out there that certainly could have the same effect on you as well, in terms of, like, again, food. So certainly that's going to be there, but we also know that there's going to be some variation in terms of what that may be needed for you. And so just being able to share that with others, so just so that they don't lose hope when they get the diagnosis, because all is not lost. There is a way to be able to get through this. And there are so many people who are willing and running and ready to help. And so whatever we can do, to help, certainly whatever I can do to help, I want to do that. I want to be able to share so people know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, your knowledge and your passion is so evident. And just your that focus on the connection between the mind and body is such an important piece for healing, and love how you're bringing food into that connection and seeing how food impacts your mind, your body, and that healing process. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hadassah, so what else would you like to say to our audience today?
I do feel like I probably wrapped it up, but I really, it is about understanding that there are lots of places here, even in your community, that are willing to help. I know for me, I was able to find a clinic where I'm actually getting vitamin C infusions. Vitamin C is powerful in terms of being able to fight cancer. And the infusions it's very high dose. So it's very, very helpful. And so, these places are not just here in Massachusetts. And what I'm finding, just talking to others across the country, they're in other places as well. So I think if you can definitely connect yourself with others who might be able to help direct you to a place that's close to you, so that you get the support you need, that would be great. I actually just came in contact with Dr. Kristi Funk, and I know that she's part of the PCRM, and I've heard about her Breast Buddies through Donna Green Goodman. I think that that's an amazing program, and I think that that's something that would really be helpful, certainly for those who are diagnosed. I do think one of the things, maybe it's something that Let's Beat Cancer can think about, maybe also having something for the families, because that's one of the things that we talked about at our program last week. It's the impact on the families as well, because it's not just the person who's diagnosed. There's guilt, there's sometimes there's shame, and so we talk about it last week in terms of the impact on just their loved one, being diagnosed with this. And so, being able to set up some sort of a community support group, even for the family, would be fantastic. And, maybe that's something that we should just take on really here in Boston and get something started. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. But I do think, for people to know that you're not alone. There are others, there are some trailblazers who have blazed this path before, and they are ready to really take your hand and walk with you. So please don't fret, don't fear. Just know that, this journey that you're on, you're going to make it through, and just remain positive throughout the entire course.
Well, I'm so glad you're part of this community here, and for being here and sharing all of this. It's so wonderful. Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. Dr. Chandler, one last question.
Okay.
What do you think it will take for the public at large to incorporate this information and shift to eating more plant-based foods?
I think we're starting to see that shift now as people are thinking more about self-care, especially going through the pandemic, and they're thinking more about the environment and the impact of their food choices on the environment. And people are also thinking more about prevention. At least that's what I've seen. I know I've witnessed that in my own patients when I was doing primary care, that patients were thinking, what can I do differently? Because, for example, fear about the vaccine, people like, oh, I want to do all these natural things. Well, it also led them to think about, what foods am I eating that can strengthen my immune system? So individually in our communities, I think we need to think about, how do we educate our communities more so that they're aware of how food impacts their health. And as we are starting to focus more on social determinants of health and food deserts and community environment, that is leading us to think more about food. And I know in Boston, we've had all sorts of food programs to give people access to healthy foods. We've had cooking classes. Even during the pandemic, we did cooking classes in a safe way with kids to continue to encourage them to do healthy eating and prepare foods at home. So there are many different ways that we can do this. Educating people through cooking classes, legislatively advocating for more opportunities for healthy foods to be put into our school systems. I mean, there are just many different levels at the advocacy level, at the family level, at the individual level to make healthy choices. And of course, since this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we also want to encourage our women to make sure they're getting their mammograms. I know some people are fearful of the radiation from mammograms, but early detection, of course, we would like to prevent, but we also have to think about early detection because breast cancer stage 1 is is a whole different ball game than breast cancer stage 4. So we want to encourage people to engage with the healthcare system too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That's great. I think you gave everyone listening at least one actionable step that they can do today, right now to make a difference for their health and for their community.
Yeah, and
Thank
Kara,
you.
I think if I could just add one thing to that too.
Sure.
When I think about helping the public be able to transition, because I do think I agree with wholeheartedly with everything what Dr. Chandler said. There's a lot more documentaries out there, right, that really help to highlight the importance of food and how it can really be healing for you and preventative from a disease perspective. I think what is also would be helpful is it's just making the foods that are right now as easily accessible and that are not helpful for your healing and for your health, making the foods that are good for your health, making those just as accessible or more accessible. Because right now, when it comes to, the purchasing power and so forth, and plus some of these inner communities, they just don't have the purchasing power. And I know Dr. Chandler talked about some of the resources available in Boston, which is absolutely great. I just don't know that all of them are aware that those resources are available. And so it's important to make sure that we're hitting the channels, the social media channels that the parents are actually engaged in, if they're able to do that, because they may just be so busy with their children that they don't even have an opportunity to really come up for air. Because I was talking to a friend of mine and she is definitely encouraging her children to make good food choices. But when they go home to the parents are just like, can you please not share this with my child? It's really sad. But I think the reason why is because they can't afford to get it. It's easier to be able to go to McDonald's, or it's easier to be able to go, these other places and get this other food for them because they don't have a lot of time either to spend to make the food. So I think if there's a way to be able to make it not seem so arduous, right, in the preparation of the food for a family of 4 or a family of 6, I think that would be really helpful. And then just making it accessible, making it just as easy to get as a hamburger over at McDonald's. I think that would really help to make a difference. And the public, wanting to adopt this more. I mean, sometimes it's also needs to be just as tasty, right? Because that's the other thing, right? We're human. We want things to taste good. And so somehow we also need to be able to transform that myth that if you eat a plant-based diet, it's not going to taste good. So I think being able to change that mindset as well would be another step forward in terms of people being more willing to adopt a plant-based diet. But I just think you got to have the plant-based food at the same level of exposure as these other foods that are getting the subsidies, right, that are making it so much easier to grab.
Yeah, absolutely. When the cost and the convenience of healthy foods, matches or is better than the cost and convenience of unhealthy foods, that's when we win.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
definitely.
Incredible. A wonderful discussion. Thank you so much. At age 40, a breast cancer diagnosis blindsided Samantha Harris, host of dozens of TV shows, including Dancing with the Stars. She amazingly pivoted her entire personal and professional life and is now certified holistic health coach and certified fitness trainer, helping thousands of women with their health and breast cancer journeys. She also serves as a national ambassador for Susan G. Komen and the American Cancer Society. Welcome, Samantha.
Hello, everybody. Hello. It's Samantha Harris here. I am beyond thrilled to be a part of this beautiful and important event and to be able to share with you not only my personal cancer journey story, but also why and how I am more vibrant and energetic than I have ever been in my entire life, living healthier and cancer-free than I ever thought I even could be. So I want to start first by sharing a little bit of my cancer story and journey. And then I want to share with you some of the top tips for how you can take control of your own health and wellness, from how you're eating to the products you're putting on your body, and being able to reduce your toxic load to live as vibrantly as possible into the long, long distant future. So my cancer story is this. So, I was having just the best time in my TV hosting career, all my seasons on Dancing with the Stars, simultaneously with my job at Entertainment Tonight, and a stint on Broadway and dancing jazz hands Fosse, doing Chicago 8 shows a week. And I felt like I was healthy. And I thought, I'm about to turn 40 and I should probably get one of those mammogram things. My dad died of colon cancer. His mom was a breast cancer survivor. I might as well set this baseline. My husband and I had daughters who were just 3 and 6 at the time. So got the mammogram, it came back clear, which is what I had anticipated. Again, I was the one eating the cheeseless pizza and the skinless, boneless chicken breast and the egg white omelet. So of course it's going to be clear. I exercise every day. And 11 days later, I was changing after a workout. You know how tight those sports bras can be. You're moving them a little to the left, a little to the right. And all of a sudden I went, oh, that's funny. That lump hasn't been there before. I quickly took control. I said, you know what? I just had a clear mammogram. I'm sure it's nothing, but let's just double check. So I went to see my long-time OBGYN, trusted her more than any doctor I'd ever had in my life. I'd been seeing her since my early 20s. She delivered both my kids. I went in, she gave me a quick clinical exam, and she said, you know what? You're turning 40. This is what 40 looks like, lumpy breasts. It's probably glandular. She sent me on my way, said it was nothing. Okay. A month later, lump still there, pesky little thing. I went to get a second opinion. Again, it's not cancer, just had a clear mammogram. So I went to see my internist. Same quick clinical exam, felt around, said, it's nothing. If you're worried, we'll keep an eye on it. Sent me on my way. Well, before I knew it, 4 months had passed. The holidays had come and gone. It was a very busy time. And all of a sudden I came up for a breath of air and I said, oh my gosh, this lump is still there. Well, I finally said, why don't I go to see a specialist who looks at breasts every day and would know what to look for if there's an issue. Again, not for 1 second thinking I had cancer, not for 1 second thinking there was any concern, but wanting to go to the expert. And after a more thorough exam, diagnostic testings from ultrasound, needle biopsy, she also didn't think that it was cancer. But she said, there's an odd proliferation of cells. Good news is it's not cancer. Bad news is I don't know what it is. Let's take it out. So I had a lumpectomy. Never had surgery in my life, but let's do it. Look, my boobs did what they needed. They got me my husband, they breastfed my kids and nourished them. And, let's take that little lump out. So we took it out, and she still didn't think it was cancer. And a week later, I went back for my final pathology results, told my husband, hey, babe, not cancer. You stay home, stay with the kids. It's fine. Who wants to be in a dark, dingy doctor's office all afternoon anyway? Yeah. So that's when I found out, not only did I have ductal carcinoma in situ, breast cancer contained within the duct, but also invasive breast cancer. So 2014 was the year of 3 surgeries and 3 recoveries. After much hemming and hawing, I opted to have a double mastectomy with reconstruction, 2nd stage reconstruction surgery. And I was flabbergasted because none of the genetic tests came back that I had a link to this breast cancer. I thought, how is that possible? I live what I thought was such a healthy life. How could I have cancer? 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with invasive breast cancer over the course of her lifetime. I'm a national ambassador for both Susan G. Komen and the National Cancer Society. And so when I learned that statistic, but also learned that only 5 to 10% of breast cancers are actually hereditary, I'll be honest with you, I was baffled, absolutely floored. I didn't understand it. I couldn't get my brain around it. So I did what I always did best. The journalist in me started to research, speak to experts, find out everything I could. And I determined it really is what we put in, on, and around our body that affects our overall well-being, that turns on or off potentially dormant cancer cells living in our body, that turns on or off certain DNA. And I started to make changes. I started with my deodorant, going aluminum free, even though there has been no conclusive scientific studies saying that the aluminum can lead to the breast cancer, but it was a gateway for me to find that, oh, there are a lot of toxins in our products. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting in a makeup chair being shellacked with gosh knows what chemical bombs every day, being hairsprayed to high hell, oh, you know, double hockey sticks. Not having any idea that there were endocrine disruptors and carcinogens and allergens in a lot, if not all of these products. And how I was eating and nourishing myself wasn't actually the nourishment I needed. It was nutrient deficient non-foods, the low fat, the fat-free generation. I was afraid of fat itself, not realizing how important fat is to absorb certain vitamins and minerals, to build our cell membranes, to integrate healthy fats into our diet, into our lifestyle. And I started small, manageable steps to overhaul my nutrition, how I approached my exercise routine. Stress management, that wasn't something that was even in my vernacular, right? I took every job that came at me. I was like, yep, Good Morning America. You want me to be a correspondent? Yes. You want me to do this? Yes. You want me to speak there? Yes. It was always yes. I had to learn the power of no. I also had to learn to assess the relationships in my life, from personal relationships, intimate relationships with family and friends who I've known forever, to occasional acquaintances, school moms that I would see in a parking lot who would add to my stress level. And I leave that parking lot with my ears up to my shoulders for whatever reason. And I realized that was detracting from my life. That was adding stress. Was my sleep solid? Was I being mindful? All of these things were new to me. And I knew at the same time that I couldn't, it was so overwhelming, right? I mean, there's so much conflicting advice out there, especially when it comes to nutrition. And so after I did all of this research, I really wanted one comprehensive action plan to sort of guide me on how I should begin all of these different areas of that holistic approach to wellness. So I wrote my first book called Your Healthiest Healthy. Right there. So Your Healthiest Healthy, it's really that action plan that I was looking for. I'm not getting up on a soapbox and saying, you need to do this and you need to do this and this is how it's done. Instead, it's offering suggestions. Hey, these things have a lot of toxins. Here are some things you should look out for. Fragrance, phthalates, 1,4-dioxane. Are they in makeup products? Are they in your laundry detergent? Are they in your cleaning supplies? I used to think with my little kids crawling around and putting everything into their mouth off the floor, I thought, I need a chemical bomb for this place. I need to make sure my spick and span floors with highly toxic cleaning agents, not having a clue, because I'm a mom trying to do my best, trying to keep a house clean. I didn't know what I was doing. I live in Southern California. I was slathering on sunscreen on my kids, but I would buy the biggest bottle off the bottom shelf, which was the cheapest that I could find at the store because I had to go through so much of it, not realizing the harms of the benzone and the oxybenzone and the other harmful chemicals, not realizing I needed a mineral-based sunscreen that only had zinc oxide or titanium dioxide in it as the active ingredients. And I started to make slow shifts, and you can too. So many of us are raised in a world where we think, oh, well, my dad had diabetes or my mom had cancer or, Alzheimer's runs in my family. So that's going to happen to me too. But you are more powerful than you think. You can be more in control of your health and your well-being and your future and your longevity than you even may realize. And so through not just the Your Healthiest Healthy book, I launched the Your Healthiest Healthy community. It's a membership-based community where every week I offer live coaching. I'm also a certified health coach. I pivoted my entire career. I've been a certified trainer for a long time. So teaching live workout classes as part of the Your Healthiest Healthy community membership is a no-brainer. I love teaching the workouts, but I went back to school. I pivoted my whole career to become a certified health coach, to be able to help not just my small number of private clients, but to be able to help so many others. And not just within the cancer community and the cancer survivors and thrivers. Yes, yes, yes. Thrive, thrive, thrive. Let's do it long time. But let's also help those who don't want to ever have a cancer diagnosis. And the changes that we make to better our health and our wellness for not just preventing either a recurrence or ever getting cancer, breast cancer or otherwise, but those same changes for best health and longevity and energy and vibrancy are the same changes to be able to reduce your risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and certain autoimmune disorders. So before I dive deep into nutrition, I just want you to know that I want to make sure you leave today with some tools and action steps that you can do today without being overwhelmed. You don't have to do all of it at once, because it really is about the long game. And that long game comes with small, actionable, manageable steps, one little step at a time. And once you integrate that little step into your life and it becomes sort of just the new habit, okay, you're like, all right, hey, cool. What can I do to level up? Where's my next step coming from? What can I do? And that's where I love to help. And I'm really responsive on my Instagram at Samantha Harris TV. If you want to learn more, I give a lot of tips there, as well as being able to communicate with me and help you further. But let's dive a little bit into the nutrition, because my hope is to grow or even perhaps overhaul some of your nutrition know-how, right? How to eat for optimal health and energy. Now, no matter what dietary theory you may follow, whether you want to be vegan or paleo or keto or pescatarian or whatever, all of those different gurus who stand on their soapbox and say, this is the one way you should eat, and here's why, we have to figure out what's right for us. Because what works best for my body might not work best for yours or your sisters or your best friends. So we have to sometimes play around a little bit. But across the board, every nutritional guru will agree that when we start with a plant-based whole foods foundation, that is where we can really reach our optimal health. Nutrient density, right? We have the frankenfoods and the non-foods and all the packaged stuff that we fill our plate and our bellies with that aren't serving us. So if you think to yourself, is this meal or is this snack, is it serving me? Is it doing something good for my body? Not to say we can't enjoy and indulge in the ice cream. Look, I do. I have my weekly ice cream. I have nightly dark chocolate, 70% cacao or higher. Good nutritional benefits. You can say, Samantha said I can have my chocolate. There are the ways to be able to indulge, whether it's an 80-20 rule, a 90-10 rule, and have that fun. But you also can change your eating habits so you don't actually feel that you're eating out of neglect or deprivation. I look forward, and a couple of years back, I'm many years out of cancer and cancer-free and feeling energized. But pre-cancer, I don't think I would have ever said the words, I look forward to my smoothie every morning. I jones when I don't have my smoothie. But that's how I am now. I wasn't like that before, throwing this kale and the spinach and the chia and the flax and all the different, I call it the kitchen sink smoothie, because I put all the goodness in it that I know my body needs that maybe I wouldn't have eaten on its own. So how do we level up our nutrient density, right? I'm going to share a little bit of that with you. And we also want to, where can we reduce the harmful and hurtful foods that lead to those chronic diseases we're talking about? Our habits. Our habits can be so deeply rooted that it can be hard to change them. But behavior change is possible. It just takes a little bit of commitment and a little bit of trial and error to figure out what works best for you. So small, manageable steps, but here are my pillars to this lifelong health journey. Number one, build a veggie heavy base. So I kind of say, take a veg pledge, if you will. And that veg pledge basically means filling your plate, ideally, at least half full of veggies at every meal. So that could look like a tofu scramble in the morning with lots of, spinach and garlic and tomatoes and avocados in it. It could mean a smoothie in the morning with your greens, like I was mentioning, a big salad full of beans. Beans are a really wonderful food to have at least a cup of every day. Dinner could be a plant-based option, or if you're choosing to eat meat, maybe you have a small portion of grass-fed. We'll get into that, because choosing how you want to eat is also really important. The quality, the source. So making a veg pledge, super important. The next pillar of living your healthiest healthy life nutritionally is to shake the sugar. And I'm not just talking about the desserts. Like when we eat a cookie, we know, full of sugar. But what about those hidden sugars? I mean, there is sugar hidden in so many foods that we don't even think of as sweet. Your pasta sauces, your ketchup, your breads. There is sugar in your chips that are supposed to be salty, and yet they have sugars. And the thing is that there are so many synonyms for sugar that oftentimes, if we're already in that place, which if you're not, I encourage you to start reading nutritional labels, right? The ingredients labels, the nutrition facts, because we sometimes don't even realize, if it doesn't say cane sugar or maybe syrup, we might not realize it's sugar. There are over 70 some synonyms for sugar, from maltodextrin to malt barley, right? They don't sound like sugar. So why are they sugar? They're sugar. Anything that ends in OSE, fructose, sucrose, galactose, any of that, maltose, anything that ends with the word syrup. So that could be corn syrup, rice syrup, maple syrup. Although I will say, there are some really great health benefits to maple syrup, but it is very caloric and high in sugar, so you want to minimize the amount of it. So really looking at cutting down on that sugar. It's hidden in your yogurts, in your fruit flavored anything. Better to buy, if you're a yogurt eater, going organic grass fed, even better. And then getting plain and adding in fresh fruit to sweeten it up. And if you need to add even a little bit more, maybe that's that touch, a quarter teaspoon, half teaspoon of maple syrup or organic raw honey. All right, the next big pillar, fiber up. Fiber. Okay, so women in America, on average, get about 12 grams of fiber per day. Okay. The USDA recommends 25 grams of fiber per day. So here's the thing. Still not enough for optimal health. We as ladies need to aim for closer to 30 to 35 grams of fiber per day. Men, 35 to 40 grams of fiber per day. It's so much easier than you think. You're not going to be eating wheat germ all day long. No. Delicious ways to do it. Fibering up by adding chia and flax seed into your diet, which are also powerful antioxidants. Flax is a great breast cancer and prostate cancer fighter. Berries, oh my gosh, berries. I could talk about berries all day long. Huge on the fiber and huge on the antioxidants from all those phytochemicals, those phytonutrients in it. So really loading up on, a cup or two of berries, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries. If you're choosing blueberries, level up to organic. Always go organic with your produce when you can. The Environmental Working Group puts out a list called the Dirty Dozen every year. It's the 12 most pesticide-heavy veggies and fruits. And so you really want to spend your money. I'm not going to tell you where to spend your money, but when you do spend the money, choosing to spend it on the Dirty Dozen fruits and vegetables is ideal if you can't buy all organic. Then when you want to level up on those blueberries even more, going from organic to organic wild blueberries. So they have even more potent cancer fighting chemicals. So another great way to get that fiber, the cruciferous veggies, your kale, your broccoli, right? Your Brussels sprouts. And they are also very powerful. I keep going with the cancer fighters, but that's what we're all about, right? We want to avoid too many cancers out there. We don't want the breast cancer coming back. We don't want the breast cancer diagnosis, but we don't want any of the other cancers or the heart disease or the type 2 diabetes. So cruciferous veggies are your friend for sure. Hey, even an avocado, great, healthy fat, about a half of it, depending on its size, is about 7 grams of fiber. 7 grams is a good amount of fiber. And of course, we know our beans give us our fiber. And And then looking into some new options of protein. So if you're a big meat eater, look, I grew up in Minnesota, land of cows. I ate from tongue to practically tail growing up. I sucked every last bit of meat off of every lamb chop my mom made, and boy, did she make delicious lamb chops. But now I don't eat red meat. I used to eat chicken or turkey or fish 14 out of 21 meals a week. So 14 out of 14 lunches and dinners a week pre-cancer. But starting to reduce your load of animal protein, even if you're choosing to have animal protein. We grew up in a society too, where we need that big slab of meat front and center with like a little bit of veggie and a little bit of maybe, you know, a carb of some sort of potato or rice or whatever it is. So we want to flip that idea, filling half your plate with veggies at every meal, and then really reducing the amount of meat to more of a condiment meat, as some people, some experts like to talk about. So reducing dairy is another really healthy way to reduce cancer risk, right? So dairy is really high in the insulin-like growth factor 1, that's IGF-1, which is a known cancer promoter. And dairy consumption increases your body's level of IGF-1. So also people think, well, got milk, right? We had all those milk campaigns. We have to have it. We have to have it for strong bones. But interestingly, vitamin D really is the big fortifier for our bones. We do need calcium, of course, but the countries with the highest dairy or cow milk consumption actually have the highest percentage of hip fractures and breaks. And guess what? The US, highest level of dairy consumption in the world, highest level of those hip fractures and breaks. So just a little something to think about. We talked about organic, but again, really choosing when it comes to whether it's, if you are choosing meat, choosing organic and grass-fed, or if it's poultry, pasture raised. When we're talking about fish, going with the lower mercury fish. There are some great, especially brain boosting health benefits to fish, getting your omega-3s, the DHA in the fish. You can always take a supplement and go vegan with an algae supplement for your DHA. That's what I choose to do. I have sushi once a week. It's my 90-10 rule. I love me my sushi. But if I'm going to choose other fish during the week, you want to ideally go for the low mercury, lower in the PCBs. Those are those harmful toxins that are floating in our waters, our overfished, toxic waters. So wild Alaskan salmon, it could be king salmon, sockeye, silverback, whatever your favorite is. Other options for low mercury would be, and low contaminants would be sardines, mackerel, sole is a good one. So those anchovies, I know I'm not an anchovy or mackerel or sardine person. So if anyone has any good recipes for them, shoot them my way. And then when you're eating out, a good question to ask is, what kind of oil do you cook in? And I can go deeper into this, but I want to make sure as we're coming across the end of our time, that I touch base on what we're putting on our body in terms of the toxins. But oils, so we need a good amount of omega-3 oils to be as healthy as possible. Omega-6 is the other oil, the omega-6 fatty acids, and those can be actually quite harmful. It's the standard American diet, right? The SAD diet that leads us to, unfortunately, have really high levels of omega-6 fatty acids in our bodies, and that leads to a lot of disease. It should have a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Most Americans on average are a ratio of 12 omega-6 to only 1 omega-3. We need to shift that completely and really reduce it. So a lot of our oils, soybean oil, these are high in omega-6, and we want to reduce or avoid them altogether. Canola oil, safflower, sunflower, a lot of the seed oils. We want to really stick in vegetable oils, anything that's hydrogenated, oils, trans fats, those are like big bad no. Really trying to infuse and cook with avocado oil is my favorite. It also has a high smoke point. If you're choosing the wonderful organic extra virgin olive oil, it does not have a high smoke point. So you want to saute very low heat, or just use that for your drizzle over maybe a salad, keeping it cold, and choosing avocado oil or coconut oil, refined or unrefined, depending on whether or not you like that coconut flavor. is a great option. Okay, so I could talk forever about nutrition. I could deep dive more. If you have more questions, reach out to me through Instagram or on my website. I can definitely go deeper into all that. But let's talk about our beauty products. So women on average use about 12 personal care products a day. And if you were to take each of the ingredients and line them up, that would be about 168 different chemicals within those 12 products every day. Hair products, lotions, makeup, right? So we think about, our government says, oh, but they're all safe levels. But think about the continual use, day after day, layer over layer, just seeping into our skin, our biggest organ, right? Okay, so once the chemical enters our body, it's absorbed through the bloodstream, it's distributed throughout our whole body. So I just want to take a little mental note here, a checklist. These are just some subtle signs of toxins in your body. I'm not talking about the extreme going all the way to the disease side of things, which we'll talk about, but just subtle signs of toxins in your body. Brain fog, low energy, constipation, new skin issues that pop up, physical aches and pains. Does that resonate with anyone? You're like, yep, that's totally me. I got that one, right? So those could just be sort of low level symptoms of toxicity in your body. So keep off your bod. I have a list in the book called the Keep Off Your Bod list. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. These are ingredients that so again, just like reading the food labels and ingredients labels on your grocery items, same thing with your drugstore items that you're buying or putting on your body in your personal care products. Parabens. Thankfully, that's one that most people have heard of. Paraben free, great option, but you still don't want to be tricked by the marketing because a lot of times they slap labels. I mean, you go to food aisles and it'll say heart healthy, boost immunity, and yet there's like color dyes and junk in a lot of that food that's terrible for you and actually detrimental to your overall well-being. Whereas same thing with parabens. It might say paraben free on the bottle, but what else is in there? But right now, parabens. So parabens are linked to breast cancer, skin cancer, reproductive issues. So parabens are a type of chemical that are endocrine disruptors, and they interfere with the hormone systems in your body. They can chemically mimic estrogen, so they really throw things out of whack. And here's a really interesting thing. So most of the studies on parabens with regard to cancer cells have been done in a petri dish where they have the cancer cells and they drop the parabens right in there. And so it's just very isolated, parabens, cancer cells. But in real life, there are a lot of other factors that come into play, right? Growth hormones that occur naturally in our body. So after testing the effects of parabens on breast cancer cells with different types of hormone receptors, researchers actually found that when combined with a growth factor that's naturally found in the breast cells, it took actually just a measly 1% of parabens to stimulate breast cancer growth. So yeah, parabens, more carcinogenic in real life than they are in the lab. So a word of warning. So phthalates are the other one I want to talk about for right now. So phthalates are oftentimes a catch-all term used with the word fragrance. Phthalates aren't usually the word phthalate is not individually listed on the ingredients label, so it gets really tricky. They are basically something that can lead to breast cancer and hormone disruption, reproductive issues, early puberty. So we really want to avoid that. So by avoiding fragrance in general, it's a really great way to protect your health. Fragrance is a catch-all term, as we said. It's also protected because it's proprietary. So if I'm company X and I'm making a lotion and I need a fragrance because I want to scent it beautifully for my, my clientele, my customers, I'm going to reach out to third-party company L. Okay, I should maybe call them company phthalate, company F, company F for flunks and for fragrance. And company F gives me that fragrance to add into my ingredients for my lotion. Well, that company doesn't have to tell me as the maker of this specific lotion what's in their fragrances. So I just pass it right along to my customers. We need to become empowered as consumers to know what we're putting on our body, in our body, around our body, whether it's the cleaning supplies in our house, right? Our laundry detergents. If you can get rid of your dryer sheets and your fabric softeners, those companies don't have to, the laundry detergent, be careful what's in it. Those companies don't have to disclose. They don't even have to put an ingredients label on the packaging. So we have no idea what we're getting into unless we choose a company that's being transparent, that is really trying to protect our health with clean ingredients. So fragrance is a one big no-no and a way to stay away. It doesn't mean that you can't have wonderfully scented things, because there are essential oils that are really pure and wonderful to use that companies can use, and those companies will be transparent with you. Petroleum is found in moisturizers, petroleum jellies, mineral oils, and it's not toxic when it's properly refined, but a lot of them can be contaminated with PHAs, which are linked to skin cancer. So you want to definitely check out that, is that petroleum-based product highly refined or not? And sometimes you can find that on that company's website. Formaldehyde, look, from hair color to hair straightener, nail polish treatments, formaldehyde is a known carcinogen. Again, a 90-10 rule here. If you can clean out all your products, look, first I started with the deodorant, then I went to my foundation because I'm putting it all over my face and neck. So my foundation was the clean next swap. And then I thought, okay, what's next? Can I change up my blush, my eyeshadows, my eyeliners? When it came to my nail polish, you can choose 5 free or 7 free. And that means formaldehyde, as well as a bunch of other baddies, aren't in those ingredients. So let's see, 1,4-dioxane, I also I may have mentioned, similar to phthalates, it's not listed on the label. It's a known or probable carcinogen. And it's not necessarily an intentionally added ingredient, but it's a contaminant that's created when certain common ingredients come together. And so it's found in a lot of personal care products and laundry detergent. They're oftentimes contaminating the SLS, the sodium lauryl sulfate that's found in toothpaste and shampoos, things that basically need to get foamy and sudsy. So if you can reduce products that have sodium lauryl sulfate, or PEGs, PEG, that's the polyethyl glycol. Sometimes it will say PEG and then a dash mark and then a number that's listed. Then you'll know there might be 1,4-dioxane in that as well. So something else to just look out for. I already talked about sunscreen. So going mineral based is always the better way to go. Octinoxate, which is if you're going for the spray sunscreens, not only does it have a propellant chemical in it, but it also oftentimes has octinoxate, which is a reproductive toxin and an endocrine disruptor. And of course, we don't want that. And it's also banned in Hawaii. So it's good to know that if the Florida Keys and Hawaii are banning because of certain ingredients in the sunscreen products, because they're concerned about the delicate balance of the ocean and the coral reef, then we've got to wonder, well, what about our sweet, sensitive little skin here? So another great option. Because I know I'm wrapping up on our time here, I want to make sure that you know that Think Dirty is a wonderful app that can give you sort of a quick girl's guide to products that are safer or more harmful and guide you to some healthier alternatives. So that's Think Dirty. EWG.org, that's the Environmental Working Group. They're a nonprofit. They do a lot of great work. They give you that list of the dirty dozen, right? The pesticide heavy fruits and vegetables, and the clean 15, which are the least pesticide heavy. They also have the ability in the Skin Deep database on the EWG.org website to be able to enter in a product or even just a name of an ingredient, and it'll give you on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the cleanest, 10 being the most toxic, what that rating is. By the way, fragrance, it's a 9. So there you go. I have so much more to share with you. I love sharing all of these things with you, and I hope that you will reach out to me again, Instagram at Samantha Harris TV. If you want to learn more about the Your Healthiest Healthy community, the membership community, or the retreats that I do a couple times a year, you can also reach out to me, DM me on Instagram. And I know that they're also going to give you the information for the website, yourhealthiesthealthy.com or Samantha-Harris.com. And I can get to you with all of of a lot more information as well. I have loved being with you. I hope that you enjoy the rest of this event, and I will see you next time. Mwah.
Thank you so much for that informative talk. I'm so pleased now to welcome Dr. Neal Barnard, President of the Physicians Committee. Recently, he co-authored a study appearing in the journal Menopause on how a plant-based diet and soy can help alleviate hot flashes. He's going to present his findings and give you steps that you can do at home.
This was basically a lifesaver for me because I've got my quality of life back. I'm not dealing with the hot flashes that were really debilitating at one point. And, we've got 4 kids, so I'm more present, and just my overall mental state is better because I'm feeling good.
About 80% of postmenopausal women have hot flashes in North America. Vasodilation is the cause. That means that the tiny blood vessels open up suddenly, imparting heat to the skin. They can leave you drenched with sweat, they can disrupt your sleep, they can leave you really miserable. But researchers noticed that in Japan, hot flashes were rare when the diet was more rice-based, but they became quite common when meat and dairy products became popular, suggesting a role for diet. In addition, soybeans contain isoflavones, which appear to be effective against hot flashes. And one of these isoflavones is called daidzein. It's converted by your gut bacteria to another one called equal, which might be particularly effective against hot flashes. But if you're not on a healthy diet, you probably can't convert the daidzein to the equal. So our research team hypothesized that the combination of a healthy plant-based diet plus regular soybeans would be more effective than either one alone. 38 women joined the study, age 54 on average, and half of them were in a control group, made no diet changes. The other half went on a totally plant-based diet, a vegan diet, and they also had a half a cup of soybeans every day. Now, because we did the study during the pandemic, everyone got an electronic scale that allowed us to track their weight remotely. They all used the MyLuna app so they could track their hot flashes in real time. And they tracked other symptoms on electronic questionnaires. Everyone got non-GMO soybeans, which they cooked up in an Instant Pot, and they could put them on salads or in soups. And the results were as follows. There was a 79% reduction in hot flashes overall in the diet group and a 49% drop in the control group. But moderate to severe hot flashes dropped 84% in the diet group from on average about 5 a day to less than 1 per day. And almost 60% of the diet group participants became totally free of all moderate and severe hot flashes. In addition, physical symptoms, psychosocial symptoms, sexual symptoms improved as well. The women described the diet as pretty easy to follow. One question came up, and that's about soy. Does it relate to cancer? And the answer is soy products are associated with reduced risk of breast cancer and also with better survival in women previously diagnosed with cancer. Let me share with you what some of the women had to say about the study.
My hot flashes were very severe before the study. I had them almost every hour on the hour, or maybe twice an hour. During the nighttime, I would have night sweats and I was miserable.
They were coming about 4, 5 times a night, as if I were getting a fever and I were going to pass out.
I would classify them as extreme. So I was having them often, very frequently throughout the day. In the evening, it was interrupting my sleep. And that was having a very, just a negative impact on my overall well-being, my health, mentally and physically.
After I started my diet, I started feeling a lot more healthier, a lot more energetic. I was sleeping better at night, and I did notice that my hot flashes had diminished tremendously.
I have been holding on to about 10 pounds or so since my children were born that I just couldn't seem to get rid of no matter what I did. And those pounds are completely gone now, along with a few others I had gained over the last few years. So that was exciting too. And of course, my hot flashes are significantly better now.
And I truly, truly do not miss the American diet that I was on before. I enjoy this way of eating. I will continue eating this way. And as a result, I feel that my hot flashes have gone in control.
I would share that before you jump to anything any kind of medication or any route like that, I would try this route because it's easy, it's immediate results, and it's just simple. It's anybody can do it.
Thank you, Dr. Barnard. Step 2 is to exercise regularly. Dotsie Bausch, a 2012 Olympic silver medalist and the executive director of Switch for Good, a nonprofit organization made up of dairy-free athletes, trainers, doctors, dietitians, and influencers.
Hey there, PCRM Summit. I hope you all are having an awesome day. My name is Dotsie Bausch. You may know me from the documentaries Personal Gold or the Game Changers film, or as a host of the Switch for Good podcast. I am an activist and a former anorexic who turned my life around and became a professional athlete in the sport of cycling, capping my career in 2012 with a silver medal at the London Olympic Games on a plant-based diet. When I was a little girl, my grandmother was diagnosed with breast cancer. She had a double mastectomy, but no reconstructive surgery. I remember her scars like it was yesterday, and her 2 jelly boobs that she would fill her bra with. And she always let my sister and I play with those jelly boobs whenever we wanted to. I remember thinking how funny she was about her jelly boobs and how open she was about what had happened to her. But as I grew older and she passed away from that breast cancer, I realized now that having both of her breasts removed was probably very traumatizing to her. And I vowed I would do everything in my power not to get breast cancer. 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime. Now think of your closest friends and family, those women in your life that you just don't think you could do life without. The ones who are there for you through thick and thin. You probably have at least 6 or 7 who are close to you like that. Well, one of you will be diagnosed. But there is some good news. 80 to 90% of breast cancer can be mitigated with what we put in our mouth. I wish we knew this when my grandmother was still alive. Since then, I have learned so much more, and I have learned that we can actually turn good cells on and bad cells off, and we can do it with the power of food and movement and soulful experiences and relationships. But we can literally bathe ourselves in nutrients and fight cancer. We have about 50 billion cells that turn over every single day in our body. So the power is in your hands, and the power is in my hands. I unfortunately have 3 breast cancer risk factors. As you already know, my grandmother had breast cancer. Number 2, my husband and I are child-free by choice. So the very fact that I have not been pregnant raises my risk of getting breast cancer. And to keep us child-free, I use Depo-Provera birth control and have for about 18 years. This birth control raises the risk of breast cancer slightly. It does decrease my risk of ovarian cancer, so I guess I've got that going for me a little. So, since I have 3 risk factors, and I am an athlete and somewhat of an overachiever, I have not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 things I do every single day to mitigate my breast cancer risks. Number 1, I eat a lot of antioxidants. Antioxidants are actually anti-cancer weapons, if you will. Broccoli, kale, collards, bok choy, blueberries, raspberries, and yes, a little bit of dark chocolate at the end of every night. Just to give you an idea of the amount I eat daily, this is the size of the bowl full of antioxidants I have for lunch. It's pretty big. I have a big appetite. Number 2, I eat 1 to 2 servings a day of soy. Tofu, tempeh, or edamame, those are my favorites. I love their anti-cancer properties. And tip, listen to the Switch for Good podcast episode number 125 to hear why and how soy is so protective from Dr. Kristi Funk. Number 3, I eat foods rich in sulforaphane. Sulforaphane is a natural plant compound that's derived from cruciferous veggies like broccoli and Brussels sprouts. It is known for its antioxidant, antimicrobial, and anti-inflammatory properties. So lots of broccoli sprouts and alfalfa sprouts on top of my very big salads. Number 4 is I move a lot. I do like to exercise, not to the degree that I did before in training for the Olympics, but exercise, it does make me feel good, and it's a whole lot cheaper than therapy. So what kind of exercise do I do? People ask all the time, and they ask me, what kind of exercise should I do? I usually just say, the kind of exercise that you will do, right? You've got to do something that you enjoy. Don't do or make yourself do an exercise that you hate. So I typically mountain bike a couple days a week. Sometimes I'll find myself in a spin class if I run out of time. I love a good hot yoga class. I do that at least once a week. And I like to stay strong. So I try to work out with weights at least a couple of times a week in my garage. And I am a mad hiking fan. So I love hiking with my rescue pup. I have a challenge for you in this exercise category. I want to challenge you if you are currently not moving as much as you know you should. I want you to do 10 minutes a day every day and not a moment more. So no 11 minutes, you overachievers. I want you to do 10 minutes a day every single day, because that is going to form the habit that you need, and then you can keep it. And then, of course, 2 or 3 of those days, you could go a little bit over the 10 minutes, working yourself into 30 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever it is. But for starters, 10 minutes a day, okay? And not a moment more. All right, number 5 is I try to pamper my soul just about every day. Not always successful. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 days a week, but pampering your soul could be anything. For me, it's hiking in the mountains with my rescue pup, like I mentioned, but without any technology. Phone stays at home. No technology has ever gone on any of our hiking adventures. I do yoga. That certainly replenishes my soul. I meet a friend for dinner, or I go to the movies with my husband. For some reason, the two of us just love going to the movies together. It's really just anything that feels enriching to me, enriching to my soul. So whatever that is for you, just do it daily. All right, y'all. That's it for me. Enjoy the summit, everyone, and let's kick cancer's ass together with the power of plants.
Thank you, Dotsie. Now please welcome Ruth Heydrich, PhD, a 6-time Ironman triathlon finisher who's won more than 900 medals in races around the world, including more than 60 marathons. Dr. Heydrich is a breast cancer survivor and authored A Race for Life, Chef Cookbook, Senior Fitness, and Lifelong Running. She's joined by registered dietitian Jennifer Paul to talk about Dr. Heydrich's incredible story and discuss the importance of being active.
So, Dr. Ruth, can you start us off by telling us what you know about the power of diet for reducing risk for breast cancer or recurrence?
The power of diet is so, it's incredible. What we know about cancer right now is that animal products and oils set the stage for an impaired immune system, mutations, and leading to breast cancer. And changing your diet, getting rid of the animal foods and oils and eating whole, non-refined foods, it can empower your immune system and prevent the cancer in the first place, or if it's too late, can reverse it. I want to tell you how I found out about this. It starts, I always wanted to be healthy. And at age 33, I started noticing little signs here and there of aging and thought, oh gosh. I came across a newsstand, a new book titled Aerobics. I had never seen that word before. This is back again in 1968. Kenneth Cooper had just been assigned to get the Vietnam War 18-year-olds into great shape in a hurry. And he did this by running. And the results were spectacular. So he published this book, Aerobics. So I picked it up out of curiosity and saw how powerful it was. I went out for a first run and got hooked and been running ever since. And I kept getting longer and longer distances. And finally, I was doing marathons. And after running a bunch of marathons, I thought I'm the fittest, healthiest person in the world. And then I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I had this lump in my breast that was 5 centimeters that big, and thought, how can this possibly be? Impossible. I'm fit and healthy. It must be a wrong opinion. So I got second, third, fourth. And there was no question. It was stage 4 breast cancer had already spread to my bones, liver, and one lung. And I'm thinking, this is devastation. I was so distraught. I hadn't gone back to work yet and happened to pick up a newspaper and saw this little notice. It's yellow with age because, again, 1982. And it said, wanted women with breast cancer to participate in diet research. And I had nutrition courses in university and thought I knew everything about nutrition. I thought, well, I can help prove that. Oh, by the way, I was working on my PhD at the time and had done some research and thought my diet of just skinned chicken and low-fat dairy was the answer. And so I called and got right through to, some of you are going to know who this is, Dr. John McDougall. And I told him I had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And he said, get your medical records. I want to talk to you. So a couple of days later, I'm in his office and he says, with cholesterol this high, you are at as high a risk of dying of heart attack as you are the breast cancer. And I said, wait just a darn minute. I'm running marathons. I'm healthy. He said, no, you're not. And I told him about the diet. And he said, that's exactly what I want to prove, that I don't want you can't have any chemo radiation to participate in this research study. And so I said, okay, well, and I was a little dubious. So he reached around, pulled open a file drawer, and he says, here's all the research that shows why I'm doing this. It's the epidemiological studies that show populations with high animal foods have high breast cancer, and conversely. And here are the animal studies that you put tumors on. Anyway, evidence was so convincing. So 2 hours later, that's how long he spent with me that day. 2 hours, this is a small town, Kailua in Hawaii. He didn't get a lot of people responding. And the timing was just incredible, like 3 days after being diagnosed. So 2 hours later, I walk out of his office, a confirmed low-fat, vegan, whole food, brown rice, oatmeal, sweet potatoes. It was an easy conversion, and I loved it from the day on. And so that's how I know. All the breast cancer signs had started to disappear. The bone pain was going away right away. My liver enzymes normalized and negative on the scan, and the hot spots in the bone faded a couple of months later, and that tumor in my lung got encapsulated. So there was clear evidence that it was working, and the benefits were incredible. I had more energy. I did another marathon just 4 months later and took 17 minutes off my best time. That was incredible. And the recovery was so fast, I actually ran back home afterwards. And so I thought, here's the proof, and everybody's going to notice. And then what happened shortly after that was reading about the Ironman triathlon, which happened right here in Hawaii. And so it was the 2.4 mile swim and 112-mile bike. And then you run a marathon. And I thought, I'm going to enter that. Now, keep in mind, by this time, I was almost 50 years old. And I thought, and these were all young 20-year-old males and competing against them. So anyway, I did a half Ironman 1 year later, 1983 and 1984. I finished the Kona Ironman, and here's the picture of my finish line.
Wow.
And I thought everybody's going to be converted, and here we are.
That's incredible.
This fight trying to get people to recognize that it's the food, and this big campaign about pink. My pink shirt and my headband is from a race for the cure. you know, and in fact, I gave a talk just before this particular race and told them it's the food, it's the diet. It's not, there are environmental factors, of course, and we need to address those. But, you know, number one by far is the food, and it's easy. I love the food. And anyway, that's my story. Oh, and the rewards. Behind me, there are almost 1,000 trophies.
Wow.
And, you know, much more rewarding can it be besides reversing cancer, feeling really healthy, and getting a big trophy at the end of exercise? But again, still number two, diet number one.
Exactly. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. It is just so amazing and inspiring to hear. Do you have any words of wisdom to share with others who have been diagnosed with breast cancer, or maybe some words of motivation?
Well, I have a website. Well, actually, I've got several books behind me. Next to the Golden Shoe, which was an award from Runner's World magazine, Runner of the Year, A Race for Life. And that was prompted by Dr. McDougall after getting some front page coverage of Ruth, a Woman of Iron. He got me to write a book. And so that's A Race for Life. And so all the information, the before, during, and after my breast cancer is in there. A Race for Life by Lantern Books. And when I turned 70 and was still doing triathlons, my editor, Martin Rose, said, we need you to write a book on senior fitness, because the diet, it's not just breast cancer or other cancers, especially prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. It is also heart disease, which kills far more people than breast cancer does. And my website is ruthheidrich.com. And there's an Ask Dr. Ruth, a little button there. You punch that, and it takes you to my website, and I answer questions every day. I have questions from somewhere in the world. This internet is incredible. The coverage. Saudi Arabia. I was astounded to see a question from Saudi Arabia. Besides, Israel, all over Europe, all over Canada, US, Australia, and New Zealand. So we're reaching out and getting to people. And that's what my mission is right now, to help as many people as possible.
Wow, I love it. And I love that you mentioned that this healthy plant-based diet is not just good for breast cancer, but it's also good for heart disease. It's also good for diabetes and a healthy BMI and just a healthy lifestyle in general.
The research coming up on dementia, preventable, reversible if caught early enough. Kidney disease. Yeah. My gosh, there's just so many reasons to eat this way. And when I hear, for a while I was a volunteer with the American Cancer Society as it reached recovery. And so when women were still in the hospital and had just been diagnosed, they'd call me and I'd go visit them and take, if they'd had a mastectomy, I would take a little baggie of something so that they could feel normal again and get the message. It's the diet. And they'd say, what? What do you mean? And I said, no animal foods. And that includes no dairy. Oh, they say, most of them say, I could never give up cheese. Well, I refer them to Dr. Neal Barnard's book, The Cheese Trap, because it is addictive and one of the worst foods you can eat. So that's another mission I have, is trying to get people who have been newly diagnosed and get them to change.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the Let's Beat Breast Cancer Summit. Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and all of your wisdom with us, and for all of you your advocacy, and all that you do to help others live healthier lives.
Thank you. That's my mission and my pleasure.
Let's switch gears. Step 3 of the 4-pronged approach is to limit alcohol consumption. You can drink delicious mocktail recipes that are healthier and give you the same feel as a cocktail for social interactions. Please enjoy this mocktail recipe.
This is my cucumber cooler mocktail. To make it, you'll need a cucumber, agave nectar, fresh lime, your favorite bubbly water, and mint for garnish. I always end up eating the mint. It's supposed to just be garnish. All right, so you want to put 5 slices of cucumber into a cocktail shaker, or you can just use a glass, and then 1 ounce of the agave nectar. All right, or other sweetener. It doesn't have to be agave if you really want this cocktail and you don't have any of it in the house. Okay, so we're gonna muddle this up. Muddling actually takes some muscle. It's a bit of a workout. So we're getting 2 prongs of the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign, a little exercise and a little limiting of the alcohol. All right, so once it's good and muddled, you're gonna throw in some ice and shakety shake. All right. We want 1 ounce of lime juice. 1 ounce generally is an entire lime. So I'm gonna squeeze that and do the other half. And then go back to the shaking business. All right. All right, so shake that up, pour it into a glass over ice. Yum. And then you top it off with, you can use club soda, mineral water, Pellegrino, what have you, but bubbly is nice. And then we're gonna garnish with some cucumber, mint. I got a little wedge of lime here too. Looks like it's gonna overflow. Oh, it's so cute. And then the mint. Oh, so pretty. Look at that. Cheers.
Oh, so good. I cannot wait to have one later today. Now, a special message from Food for Life instructor and breast cancer survivor, Amberly Childs.
Hello, I'm Amberly Childs, and I am an 11-year breast cancer survivor. And I'm so excited to be here today because the power of food for medicine is something that unfortunately was not discussed a lot when I was diagnosed. But it is starting to find its way into conversations in doctors' offices. It's starting to find its way into mainstream medicine. And that's something that gets me so excited and fired up, because when I was told that I needed to switch to a plant-based diet after I was diagnosed at 36 years old, stage 3C breast cancer, it was running all through me. You know, and they said, we need you to change to a plant-based diet. It was something that was a little frightening, but it was also something that I knew seemed a little bit easier than maybe chemotherapy, right? I just have to change the foods in my kitchen, the things that are going in my body. I was really blessed to have a medical team that supported me changing my diet in addition to my traditional treatments. And that really not only supported me in the kitchen, but it supported me mentally. They provided recipes. And so this foundation that I was able to receive during my treatment really created who I am today. And in 2016, I became a certified Food for Life instructor with the Physicians Committee. And that has just been one of the highlights of my career. I have since then founded my own company. I run a plant-based food delivery company. And it brings me such joy to know that we are delivering healthy food to people who've had illness, who possibly could be sick in the future, who are caretakers for someone who's battling a chronic illness. And so the lack of food in our community, of healthy food, is something that is a big passion for me. And so I want to encourage women, I want to encourage men, I want to encourage anyone who is fighting some diagnosis of chronic illness to look inward and say, I know I can do this. And to find a team of people, to find your A team, and to build that team of support. And there are people out there like the Physicians Committee that support you, that have science behind what we're looking at, that have research ongoing research, which is even more exciting, recipes, Kickstart applications, cooking demonstrations, a team of Food for Life instructors like myself who go out in our community and talk to lay people about the importance of food as medicine. And so I really just wanted to take a moment and thank PCRM for sharing the valuable information that they do. Because when I was diagnosed at 36 years old and I started talking about using food to make my immune system strong and to help me get ready for the next treatment, I kind of got a side eye from a few people. And now I have women calling me, men calling me saying, talk to me about the power of food. They attend my cooking classes on Kickstart Your Health, Go Vegetarian. Maybe it's the Cancer Project, learning how foods can fight cancer. Maybe learning about the power of tofu and maybe combating some menopausal hot flash symptoms that I know personally I struggle with week to week. And so there's curriculum and wonderful things that are happening through the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And I think we should be shouting it from the rooftops. More people need to know that you can take control of your life. You can reboot what's going on in your environment here by changing your lifestyle. One of the things that's really important in trying to reclaim your health or just preventatively taking charge of your health is to maintain a healthy weight. Make sure we're not being abusive to alcohol. Really, check out some of our cool mocktails that are being advertised and shared with all of you. Make sure that we're eating high fiber foods. I know before I had breast cancer, no one even mentioned that word, fiber. And in our Food for Life classes, it's so important that we share with people that we need to incorporate more fiber in our diet to reduce things like cholesterol, excess hormones that are moving through our system, toxins. And eating a high fiber diet is what binds to some of those excess toxins, hormones, and removes them out of our system. And fiber is only in plant-based foods. So if you can add a few more beans to your dinner plate, if you can make sure that you're getting greens daily, maybe if it's just a small amount, but get those greens in there. Eat brightly colored foods. I like to share with my friends and family, eat the rainbow. If it looks bright and it looks beautiful, like a summer garden, can you imagine what magic it's doing in your body? So we really need to take the time to look at the foods that we're putting on our plate and engage with them. Learn. I'm not just eating beans because someone told me that they're good for me and really high in protein, but how much protein do I need? How much fiber do I need? How much is currently in my diet? So fiber is something that I think we can all start to make real small improvements with just by adding a couple more plant-based options on our meal, on our plate. So get out there. I just want to encourage people to use plant-based, to use plants in your daily routine as a fighter. I know when I'm feeling under the weather, the first thing I want to do is make a smoothie and try and boost my immune system with lots of brightly colored food, antioxidants, get some carrots in there, get that beta carotene going. So really just using food to fuel my body in addition to repairing any damage that might have been done from those cancer treatments that I've had years ago. Because I'm being real with myself. I know that the intense treatments I did helped save my life. But that was 11 years ago. And every day since then, the steps I take are what save my life and keep me here every day. And I know wholeheartedly that that is a plant-based diet. It is living a healthy lifestyle, reducing my stress, and it's sharing the power of eating a plant-based diet with others because that makes me so happy. And also, I want people to know you have power in your health. You have power in your choices, and get out there and be your own best advocate and choose plant-based and look at this wonderful Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign and all of those 4 prongs. I want you to work on, go for it, because I know that you can do it and you too can be your own best advocate for a healthy lifestyle.
So powerful. Thank you, Amberly. Now on to step 4, maintain a healthy weight. One of my favorite doctors is joining us to talk about how we can be healthy at any size. Welcome, Dr. Yami, a board-certified pediatrician, certified lifestyle medicine physician, certified health and wellness coach, author, speaker, and passionate promoter of healthy lifestyles.
Thank you so much for this honor of being part of this wonderful summit. I thank you, but I also congratulate you for taking ownership over your health and learning more about the prevention of breast cancer. This is so important, and I know that it is so meaningful for you. As a lifestyle medicine physician, I emphasize the power of consistent health promoting habits and behaviors. One of the recommendations and one of the four-pronged approaches to the prevention of breast cancer is to maintain a healthy weight. And this is a very important correlate for health and especially for breast cancer. But what I want you to understand and what I want you to know is important is that weight stability is achieved through the action of habits and behaviors. Weight itself is not something that you can do. And I may even go so far as to say that it's not something that you can directly control because it is not an action or behavior, it is a result. That is why today I want to teach you about this important set of principles called health at every size and how it can help you as an individual in your pursuit of health, well-being, and longevity. What is health at every size? In an essence, health at every size is a social justice movement and approach created by the Association for Size Diversity in Health, which addresses both policy and individual decision-making factors in the pursuit of health and well-being. The way I define it is that is the potential that each individual has to improve or maintain their health, well-being, and joy through habits and behaviors, regardless of their weight or body size. Now, health at every size does not mean that every person at every size or weight is healthy. We know that's not true, but we also know that you don't have to be a certain size to embody well-being. In addition, health at every size isn't just for people in larger bodies. We know that larger bodied people do face more discrimination, social stigma, and bias, which can be harmful in many ways, including within the medical community. But health at every size applies to people of all body sizes because the size of your body should not prevent you from pursuing the well-being that you desire today. So I want to tell you a little bit more about health at every size. It is composed of 5 principles. And again, this was created by the Association for Size Diversity and Wellbeing. The 5 principles are weight inclusivity, respectful care, health enhancement, eating for well-being, and life-enhancing movement. And I want to tell you a little bit more about those last 3 and tell you specifically how they write it out at the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. Health enhancement is to support health policies that improve and equalize access to information and services and personal practices that improve human well-being, including attention to individual physical, economic, social, spiritual, emotional, and other needs. Eating for well-being means to promote flexible, individualized eating based on hunger, satiety, nutritional needs, and pleasure rather than any externally regulated eating plan focused on weight control. And finally, life-enhancing movement is to support physical activities that allow people of all sizes, abilities, and interests to engage in enjoyable movement to the degree that they choose. And the reason I wanted to highlight those last 3 principles is because that's also lifestyle medicine. What all of this means is that instead of making your weight and the size of your body your main focus or your goal, practicing health promoting habits and behaviors can allow you to pursue the health and well-being you desire independent of your weight. especially if you find that focusing on your weight is leading to counterproductive behaviors like binge eating, or leads you into this all or nothing pattern where you throw your hands up in the air and give up all your healthy behaviors because you are so frustrated that your weight is not where you want it to be. Maybe taking this weight neutral approach might be helpful for you. We don't want to focus on weight at the expense of other health promoting behaviors, like eating a whole food plant-based diet and moving our bodies. Studies that have been done on people practicing intuitive eating, which is one of the principles of health at every size, that eating for well-being, have found that they actually do make healthy choices and that their weight stays more stable over time than people that are not practicing principles like intuitive eating. The habits and behaviors that are going to get you into the well-being and health that you desire are going to be those that are like the ones that we talk about in lifestyle medicine, but also overlap with the four-pronged approach. So it's going to include eating a whole food plant-based diet, staying physically active, getting adequate restorative sleep, managing stress, connecting with others, and avoiding or minimizing risky substances like alcohol and tobacco. In the Physicians Committee, Let's Beat Cancer's four-pronged approach, there are 3 prongs that are directly under your control. And these include eating a whole food plant-based diet, exercise, and avoiding alcohol. Remember to focus on that which you can control. Your weight may or may not change when you engage in these healthy habits, but you will be taking action on behaviors that can really make a difference in how you feel and in your health. I hope that this message is liberating and empowering and gives you the freedom and reassurance that the daily choices that you make really do matter, regardless of your body size. For more information on health at every size, visit www.asdah.org or check out the book Health at Every Size by Lindo Bacon. Thank you so much for taking part in this journey. Again, congratulations. You can find me at dryami.com, on social media at the Dr. Yami, and on my podcast, Veggie Doctor Radio.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yami. Always a pleasure to have you.
Hey y'all, my name is Brooklyn Palmer and I'm a vegan medical student and content creator. You can find me at Beats by Brooke, the food beats. I'm also getting my master's in public health. It's a priority of mine in my career and on my platform to really evaluate the complexity of health because while it's so important, it's also really individual and that's okay. Today I'm going to be talking about an accessible approach to plant-based eating and health at every size. So let's talk about plant-based eating. I myself identify as someone who's plant-based and it's getting more and more popular for good reason. We've known for a long time the significant impact that food can have on overall health. And honestly, that's one of the reasons that I was intrigued by healthcare because I felt like so many people and communities and patients could benefit from the knowledge of the impact nutrition can have. That being said, it's going to look different for everyone, and that's absolutely okay. I like to think about plant-based eating as a spectrum. Yes, you have people who are fully vegan, fully plant-based, myself included, on one end, but that doesn't mean that throughout the whole spectrum, there isn't significant benefit. And I think for some people who want to approach or explore this lifestyle, this way of eating, it can be kind of intimidating when you're thinking of the extreme of the spectrum. And so one of the things I like to educate people on is something we also talking about in a field of culinary medicine, which I practice at medical school, is how can we add more to our life? Sometimes really focusing on what we're taking away can be overwhelming for certain communities. And at the end of the day, the best change that anyone's going to make is something that's sustainable for them and their situation long term. And that's going to look different. So a great example that we did in culinary medicine is, let's take spaghetti. It's a classic American dish and it's going to look different based on your culture. This is just a good example. So let's picture regular spaghetti and a meat sauce or a vegan meat sauce, right? It's how can we take this meal, this dish, and add more plants to it? Because every plant that we're going to add is going to add unique phytonutrients and fiber and all the good things that come with it. So first step, let's change it to whole wheat pasta. That in and of itself is going to add about 4 grams of fiber, which is a significant amount. And then let's say we made the meat sauce half lentils. Lentils are absolutely underrated. They are packed with fiber and protein. And guess what? When you add like about a half a cup or so, you're adding about 12 grams of protein, and the final fiber amount becomes 10 to 13, and you start at around 3 to 4. So it's like there's 2 simple changes that, especially if you kind of start slow, maybe change up the ratio, won't taste how much different, can have a significant impact. Picture having spaghetti every day and then having it with just some lentils. And while sure, that might not be the absolute benefit you can get from a spaghetti dish, sometimes that's going to be the most realistic step, especially if you're batch cooking for a huge family, especially when oftentimes pasta can be pretty affordable. After that, you can add in your favorite vegetable, which is going to be different for everyone. Zucchini, spinach, mushroom. I think pasta is great because it's also great for frozen vegetables. Those are often underrated, but really important because a lot of times fresh vegetables are hard to get to. People end up wasting money. But frozen vegetables, especially when you integrate them in a dish that's kind of a little more moist and kind of like water-based, like a tomato sauce, is a great way. So that's just one example. And for some people, they can get zucchini noodles, all the different types of pasta. But for some people, just adding lentils, just adding the whole wheat pasta is going to be a huge step. And I think it's extremely valuable to celebrate these little steps because people can get discouraged if they think it's all or nothing. And so whether that's you or someone you love, it's so important to know that each step along the way is going to add value to your life and might help you overall in terms of creating a sustainable long-term change to your future. So let's talk about health at every size. This is a movement that's also becoming more popular and something that I'm personally really excited about. The movement in general is basically acknowledging that health is complicated. There's politics, there's social justice involved, there's so many things, mental health. And so how can we acknowledge the fact that people, regardless of their size, not only deserve health, but can start moving in that direction regardless of what they look like? This concept can get a bit confusing to people because people hear it and think the statement is saying you can be healthy at every size. A lot of people understand that weight is a component of different kinds of diseases, ailments. Of course, we're talking about breast cancer, it's related to hormonal health. But that being said, weight is also extremely multifactorial. It's not something you can just change at the snap of the finger. If we could, things would be a lot different. And on top of that all, a lot of people have negative emotions tied to weight, whether that's comments from families, our own kind of interaction with it, or just general societal kind of pressures and beliefs on weight. So health at every size, the goal of that is to really say, okay, people look different. Some people have disabilities that impact the way they can move and exercise. How can we just take what they have and move forward? And a big part of this is just the objective fact that there are so many unhealthy ways to lose weight. And unfortunately, sometimes people think, well, that's the first step I have to take in order to become healthy. But if you're doing that in an unhealthy way, it's probably not sustainable. And we know with lots of studies that the yo-yoing dieting actually ends up being worse. And so the goal of this movement is to really say, okay, like focusing on weight, which we've been doing for a long time, pointing the finger at weight, is not really getting us that far. And for some communities, it can be really detrimental. And so this is a great movement that I really recommend people looking into. It kind of goes hand in hand with intuitive eating, which again kind of says, okay, weight is not necessarily 100% irrelevant, but because it's so complicated, how about we shift the focus on lifestyle approaches? How can we focus on movement that makes us feel good? If you're moving because it makes you feel good, because you enjoy it, you're gonna keep up with it more than if you're focusing just on making your body smaller. So, movement is great. Eating, how can you eat that you really notice these effects? You're preventing disease later on in life, but also you're feeling more energetic acutely. All these things you can feel without focusing on getting smaller. So this is a really valuable movement. I personally have learned about it the past few years, and I think it's extremely beneficial, especially as I start working with more and more patients, because there are just so many complex feelings when it comes to weight, and a lot of times it kind of can just hinder success. So let's piece everything together. We have accessible approach to plant-based eating, health at every size. Really what I try to do, and what I encourage you and your loved ones to do, is to understand that approaching lifestyle medicine is going to look different for everyone. And if you want something to last, if you want something to be sustainable, the best thing you can do is to be mindful of your own situation. It's gonna look different. Yes, that avocado toast, goji berry, acai looks great on Instagram, but not everyone can have time to do that. Not everyone can afford it, and that's okay. The beauty in life is that we're all going through different journeys, and we're all going through different health and wellness journeys too. So I hope you like the presentation. Definitely check out my page, Beats by Brooke, where I talk about all these topics and more. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much and welcome everyone. Glad you are here. We are moving into our live Q&A segment at this point. So we've got me, I'm Lee Crosby, I'm a registered dietitian with the Physicians Committee, and we have the one and only Dr. Kristi Funk. Hello, Dr. Funk.
Hi, Lee.
All right, so we have had a ton of questions coming in throughout this event. So Kristi, Dr. Funk, I have a couple for you here. First off, someone wanted to know, what about alcohol that's found like in medicines, right? What do you do if there's an alcohol in your medicine?
Oh, very tricky. Oh, it's such a minute amount. It's really the chronic consumption of alcohol that's going to elevate estrogen levels and bring up that carcinogen acetaldehyde and decrease immune function. You know, little trace amount of alcohol in some decongestant or something that you're drinking is completely safe, and I wouldn't think twice.
Okay, so don't need to sweat about that. That's good. One less thing to worry about. All right, another question for you, Dr. Funk. Someone wanted to know, if you've had a hysterectomy, will your body make more estrogen? Will it make less? What's that going to do in terms of your breast cancer risk?
So prior to menopause, the main source of estrogen in our bodies is coming from our ovaries. A hysterectomy refers to removing the uterus, and you can definitely still keep fully functional ovaries when you remove the uterus. But a lot of times when people say that, they mean their ovaries came out too. And the medical term for that surgery is like impossible for your average person to pronounce. It's called the oophorectomy. So usually just hysterectomy means the whole kit and caboodle. And if that's the case, then in fact, your estrogen levels don't go up, they go down. Your main source of estrogen is gonzo, the ovaries, and now your only source of estrogen is your fat cells, where there's an enzyme called aromatase that is converting steroids from your adrenal gland, like testosterone, into estrogen.
All right, thank you. That is a really helpful clarification, I think. Now, the next question, I'm actually going to jump in on as a dietitian, because someone asked, what about processed sugar? Have there been any additional studies on the correlation between sugar and cancer? And Dr. Funk, I know you can speak to this as well, but I want to jump in with one fairly recent study from earlier this year showing that, and this was on sugary drinks specifically, right? And what they found, this was a study of more than 8,000 women who were diagnosed with stage 1 through 3 breast cancer. And they found that women who had more than 3 sugary drinks per week, not per day now, per week, had a 35% higher risk of dying of breast cancer than those who avoided sugary drinks. And just 2 to 3 per week still had a 31% higher chance of dying from their breast cancer. So I think that's a pretty good indicator that staying away from added sugars, even in small amounts when you can, again, I'm not talking about like a little sprinkle over the top of something, but you have a 12-ounce soda, that's like 10 teaspoons of sugar, give or take. So keeping your processed sugar intake low, we have pretty decent evidence that that is a good idea. Dr. Funk, do you want to add anything onto that?
I do. So the idea that cancer feeds on sugar is correct, but so do all the cells in your body, and particularly 30% of your brain is like, I'm only doing sugar, and same with your red blood cells. So you always have glucose. You can't starve cancer of sugar or glucose because you will be dead. Your cells require it. However, we even use radio-labeled sugar molecules injected into you on a PET scan. That's what PET is looking at. Because cancer is rapidly dividing, it's consuming more sugar than the surrounding baseline cells that aren't dividing. So it's true that cancer is fed by sugar, but you can't starve it by limiting sugar. And the other point I wanted to make is we're really concerned about the overconsumption of refined sugar. And you find that in a bunch of processed foods, right? Like cookies, cakes, sodas, candy. And it's those foods consumed in abundance that have led in part to our obesity epidemic. And we have just undeniable connection between being overweight and obese and elevating the risk of getting breast cancer, recurring with cancer, dying from breast cancer. So it's the connection too between the foods that are high in these simple sugars leading to the weight, which is a definite causation factor for a ton of breast cancer in the US. So the final point I wanted to make, though, is that sugar coming in its naturally packaged form, meaning like a whole fruit or a starchy vegetable, is not going to spike your blood glucose level and therefore spike insulin. And that just creates a whole inflammatory cascade and background in which all disease loves to flourish. But you don't get that big glucose spike. And Lee, I know you can speak to that as well when you're eating these whole foods that have a higher carbohydrate sugar content, but don't shy away from them. Don't worry about that level of sugar. We're talking pure sugar, and it's already like broken down. You chew and swallow it, and boop, it goes straight across that intestinal wall into your bloodstream, spiking the insulin, and that creates the inflammation, and with chronic consumption, the obesity.
Absolutely. Again, it's the added processed sugars, those naturally occurring sugars in something like fruit. We want people to eat more of that. Those are linked to lower risk of breast cancer if you're eating that whole piece of fruit. So absolutely. Thank you. Love that answer. I like this next question. Dr. Funk, do you have a good book about breast cancer nutrition to recommend?
Let me think. Oh, my book. Yes, I do. Actually, it's heavily research-based. Every single fact I say is packed with science. So you can rely on what I write in there. Chapters 3 and 4 is all about what to eat and what not to eat. And really 8 of the 11 chapters are all about risk reduction behaviors and foods to eat. So it's called Breasts, the Owner's Manual. It's in 10 different languages. So you can take your pick if you prefer to read it in Polish.
I'll get on that. I can vouch for her book. I wanted to make sure we actually address this question because Dr. Funk, I recommend your book to all my patients who come in with a family history or people who've had a diagnosis or just were diagnosed. I always send them to your book first thing. So love it as a resource.
I appreciate that.
Another doctor question here. Do you recommend 3D mammograms over 2D? What do you think?
So this is interesting. 3D mammography. If you think of your breast like a loaf of raisin bread, what woman doesn't think of her breast as bread? Everyone. Squash it between 2 plates and take a picture and tell me to find the raisins. That's 2D mammogram. From your perspective, ladies, it's the same squashing, the same plates, and just 2 shots. There's a little bit more radiation exposure with the 3D, but you just have the same experience. 1 picture this way, 1 picture that way on each breast. But what I see is totally different. Now I'm getting a slice of toast every millimeter. So like 30 to 60 or so little tiny slices through that breast. Aha, now the raisins pop out. How much better? A big head-to-head study, 3D versus 2D, showed that we find 34% more breast cancer using 3D and 17% fewer callbacks for those anxiety-provoking false positives where, oh, wait, we think we see something. We need to look again, maybe do a biopsy, and psych, it's nothing, which you're grateful for. But like that week plus that took you down, your mind unraveling to the worst-case scenario was unpleasant. So I do recommend 3D, particularly if you are dense breasted, have a strong family history of breast cancer, or you yourself have had a history of an abnormal biopsy putting you at elevated risk. However, don't fret if 3D is not available, isn't covered by insurance, or you're worried about the little extra dose of radiation, because 2D mammo plus whole breast screening ultrasound, it's just a sound wave, so there's nothing negative about ultrasounds, has actually a slightly increased detection of cancer over 3D alone. So you can do 2D plus the screening ultrasound or 3D.
All right. Hopefully that answered people's questions on the mammography. And while we're on this topic, I want to jump in on one that just came in. What are your thoughts about thermography?
Oh, useless. So it sounds so great because it has, like an ultrasound, there's just nothing negative about it. There's no radiation, there's no injection, there's no squashing, but there's also very unreliable cancer detection. I have chased down so many swirls of psychedelic colors on thermograms because they're
commonly used in Los Angeles. And I don't like get mad at people who bring them in. I'm happy to try to look, but the miss rate on cancer is too high. So whenever you look at a new imaging modality, it needs to surpass what already exists or be phenomenally safer, but still accurate. And unfortunately, I wish they worked. They just, in my now 25-year experience looking at them, even with the newer models of doing it, I'm just not finding it to be very accurate. And ironically, if it does show something abnormal, what are you going to do to chase it down? Use the things that you were trying not to use: a mammogram, and ultrasounds, and MRI, a biopsy needle. So I'm not a fan of thermography, but I like the idea.
I'm with you. I like the not squashing idea, but I don't like the inaccurate part of that equation. I want to come back to another question that's sort of on the nutrition front, and I'll give you first cut at this one, Dr. Funk, because I know this is near and dear to you. This myth, it is the myth that won't quit. Does soy cause breast cancer? If someone's saying they eat a lot of organic and non-GMO tofu and edamame, is that okay? I think I know what you might say, but go ahead.
I think you do know. So it is not only okay, it is a mandate from me. I want to see 2 to 3 servings of non-GMO organic soy a day. And why is this? Because soy, in fact, is anti-estrogenic and anti-carcinogenic. And I am the first to say and confess that for 18 years as a breast cancer surgeon, I told all of my cancer patients, are you crazy? There's phytoestrogens in soy. Do you hear the word estrogen? Your cancer is estrogen driven. Spit that miso out of your mouth. And when I wrote my book, Breast, the Owner's Manual, I dove into the soy science really for the first time to prove with science that my stance was correct, that you should be avoiding soy, and embarrassingly wrong. Like, not just is it safe, but it's protective. So all of the human studies have come pouring out in estrogen positive and negative breast cancer patients since 2009. Prior to that, there weren't any good soy studies in humans and breast cancer. So now we know, proof positive, repeatedly, study after study shows a solid, it's always between 25 and 32% reduction in getting breast cancer and having it recur and dying from it. And then there are a couple of studies that show even more phenomenal numbers, like a 60% reduction for high versus low soy consumption in breast cancer recurrence, and a 51% drop in breast cancer mortality for my estrogen negative cancer patients. So those very hard to treat and cure triple negatives have a benefit from soy consumption that obviously tells a story about soy that goes well beyond this whole estrogen, phytoestrogen, isoflavone connection, and into anti-proliferation, anti-angiogenesis, the blood flow that cancers need. So soy it up for sure. It's healthy and safe.
All right. I'm not sure there's a ton I can add to that, but just to say, she is absolutely correct. There is so much data to support consuming soy that, again, I make a point really to have soy somewhere every day. And again, the phytoestrogen piece, I think a lot of people get confused because, like you said, they're like, oh, estrogen is what I'm trying to avoid. There are 2 kinds of estrogen receptors on your breast cells, right? There's an alpha, that's like an accelerator of cell growth, and your own estrogen binds to that just great. And it can press down on that accelerator. The phytoestrogen that kind of looks like your estrogen, but isn't, that you find in soy, those isoflavones, they step on the brake. They bind to that beta receptor. So they have a different action in your body than your own estrogen does. And it's a positive thing. So please keep that in mind, that when you're having soy, it's not like you're eating estrogen. You're actually eating something that gives a slow down anti-estrogenic type of signal when it comes to your breast cells, but not for things like your bones, which is fantastic. And actually, I think we had a question that was somewhat along these lines. And Dr. Funk, I'm going to bat this one over to you. Can movements, supplements, and food choices take the place of aromatase inhibitors?
It depends on the internal biology of your cancer. So actually, there's a great new revelation that came out at ASCO this summer for the study called Mammoprint. And some of you may recognize that as the genetic analysis of your cancer that was done to determine the answer to the question, does chemotherapy benefit me in terms of survival, yes or no? Well, now there's a subdivision. It's not just high risk and low risk. It's low is subdivided into low and ultra low.
So if your mammogram print shows ultra low, this is determining how long you need to take endocrine therapy, which is your anti-estrogen pill. And if you are in the ultra low group, there is 0 change in survival after 2 years of taking it. So you can stop after 2 years. And if you're miserable on it, or if you're just really, really not wanting to take it, there's a very small 3% increase in recurrence if you're not on it at all. So I would say for those women who are highly motivated to pursue dietary and lifestyle change and fall into the super lucky ultra low group on MammaPrint, I wouldn't hesitate about that plan. Otherwise, the diet and lifestyle interventions in terms of risk reduction that I've thoroughly reviewed always seem to get a little bit higher when you're on your anti-estrogens. So I think there's a synergistic effect. For example, the one study I briefly quoted without too much detail saying that there was a 60% reduction in breast cancer recurrence for estrogen-driven breast cancer in high versus low consumers. All of those women were on tamoxifen. So they had a 60% drop, but usually with high versus low soy alone, you just see around a 32% drop. So I think there's something synergistic about the medications and the diet and lifestyle. So it's a case-by-case basis, though. I do let some of my ladies get off those pills because they're so miserable. And I do think that diet and lifestyle will reduce the risk adequately.
All right, excellent. I think that really helped clarify. And just to confirm for people again who are looking at soy and they're like, well, I'm on endocrine therapy, or like an anastrozole or tamoxifen. Is it okay to eat soy while you're on those? Because that question I've seen come up repeatedly.
It's definitely okay. They're synergistic, as I was saying. There's nothing in soy that's going to interfere with the metabolism or bioavailability of your drugs. So soy it up.
Excellent. Just again, if anyone needs to remember, soy it up. I love that. Can I quote that?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm actually going to take this next one because someone asked, does a ketogenic diet affect breast cancer risk? What about vegan keto? Because I actually co-authored a review paper on ketogenic diets. And the answer is we don't have any real clinical trial data in terms of breast cancer risk with the ketogenic diet. What we do have in terms of reducing risk for people who have breast cancer, the only data we have is looking at if it's not even about outcomes. It's just, does it maybe help with side effects? And the jury is still out. What I do want to say about ketogenic diets, as most people consume them, is that they drop the foods that we know to be most protective against breast cancer, right? So they almost entirely cut fruit. They might allow for some berries. Some of them will also limit things like salad greens in terms of, because they have some carbohydrate content. That starchy vegetables are definitely out. Those whole grains, high fiber whole grains that we know are linked to lower breast cancer risk are out. Beans, also known to be linked to lower breast cancer risk, are out or dramatically limited. So the foods we know to be dramatically protective against breast cancer are reduced or eliminated on ketogenic diets. Now, that said, we don't know about vegan keto. The concerns there are oftentimes it's always going to be very high in fat by definition, and particularly saturated fat. We know that can drive up estrogen levels and cholesterol levels, both of which are bad news in terms of reducing cancer risk and also in terms of survivorship. So at this point in time, I think the data falls fairly strongly in the anti-category when it comes to breast cancer risk. So no, I would absolutely not look at keto in terms of risk reduction or if you have it. But that said, as Dr. Funk says, sometimes science comes along that makes you reconsider your position. So I will be keeping a very close eye on this data just to see. But right now, all the information we have suggests that this is not something that's going to be beneficial. I don't know. Dr. Funk, you might have a different take on that.
No, I strongly echo what you said. I would just add this one idea, and that is that a short-term 5-day plant-based ketogenic diet, specifically the one I'm thinking of is called the fasting mimicking diet. For anyone out there who knows the work of Dr. Walter Longo at USC's Center for Longevity, he's in conjunction with a $30 million grant from NIH, created a ketogenic diet that is completely plant-based, although the seed and nut bars have honey, if that matters to you.
aside from that, it's all plant-based, and it does push you into a 5-day ketosis. And he's got good trials out there right now and published on several of them, including in breast cancer patients undergoing chemotherapy. Receiving their chemo in a fasted state potentiates the tumor kill volume while minimizing collateral damage like neuropathy and nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And then there's in healthy patients who aren't undergoing any treatments, if you do this 5-day fast, I personally do it every 4 months for cell rejuvenation and cell repair. You get into something called autophagy, autoselphage eat. Your immune system kind of scavenges out these dead, dying, damaged, deranged cells, like a rogue cancer cell that might land somewhere one day, or just your liver cells, which have been working on too much, like alcohol or Ativan or medications or what have you. So you get into this mode of like just taking the trash out, your cells do, right? So, and you get this rejuvenation and repair on day 6 when you refeed, as they call it. It makes me sound like I'm cattle or something, but the refeed day 6 in the trials against placebo in humans showed an 8-fold increase in stem cell production, which are these cells that can then go out to wherever the damaged cells were removed, and you get a perfectly new functional recruit, like a new liver cell, a new immune cell, etc. So I do think in a very short-term, periodic way, doing a plant-based ketogenic diet can maximize your health. We actually have these kits. They're called Prolon at my online store, pinklotus.com/elements. If you want to have a look in the power up section too, I have an entire blog that I wrote that you can just access for free on fasting. And I go into the deep science behind what I just briefly said.
Yeah, agreed. I see. I would put those in the fasting mimicking diet category. So to me, those aren't even ketogenic, right? Because they're not super high in fat. It is higher in fat, but very short term, calorie limited. And the data are so promising on those in terms of risk reduction overall and potentially immediately surrounding chemotherapy. But again, it's still early days on the chemotherapy side of things. But there is some really fascinating data on that. So fully agreed that I await more of those results with anticipation, because I do think there's a lot of promise there. Yeah, Dr. Valterlongo has got some really fascinating research going on. So I think we can have one last question. There have been a lot coming in, so it's kind of hard to pick. You know what? I'm going to wrap on this one because I know, Dr. Funk, this is something that is near and dear to you. Is breast cancer genetic? Is this all in our genes? Are we just consigned to this, or are we free if it's not in our genes? What's the answer there?
So 5 to 10% of all breast cancer can be attributed to an inherited genetic mutation, such as BRCA, CHEK2, PALB2. And if you have one of these inherited mutations, depending on which it is, there's a different risk percentage-wise for getting breast cancer, but it's always like unacceptably and alarmingly high. Can diet and lifestyle intervene if you have a mutation and reduce that risk lower? Yes, I have data that shows that certain consuming this or doing that will reduce risk, but it's still not reducing it to what I consider a number that makes you relax. You are very high risk if you have a G mutation. But thankfully, that is a small subset of all cancer patients, 5 to 10%. On the other end of our bell curve, I would say we've got maybe 5% that's inexplicable. Like there just must be some sort of like environmental exposure or some extreme sensitivity to emotional stress inside your cell microenvironment. Because darn it, this person is like too young to have been even living badly enough long enough if she's like, say, 35 or 40 years old with this cancer. And it doesn't make sense to us. We don't understand because she seems to have been doing it all right, so to speak, eating well, living well. So I overstated how often that happens, but it absolutely happens. And I unfortunately see it frequently. So we've got our two ends of the bell curve, but it's the big fat middle where we've got a solid 80% and maybe as high as 90% of all breast cancers in this bucket of attributable to our diet and lifestyle choices. What you eat and don't eat, drink and don't drink, do and don't do really has an effect on either stoking cancer or choking cancer. So everything we've been talking about today and everything the Let's Beat Breast Cancer campaign stands for is about choking cancer, starving it, to make sure that those rogue cells that always occur within our bodies never gather enough of the momentum and nutrients that they need to actually become a threat to your life. you have so much control over this disease.
Absolutely. That is, I think, a great note to end on. That again, you're right. Some people, they do everything right and they still get that, right. And they still get that diagnosis. So there's no room here at all for blame, but golly, wouldn't you put your seatbelt on every time you get in the car, right? So I think that following these 4 Let's Beat Breast Cancer steps, pushing those healthful plant-based foods like you're talking about, getting screened on schedule, everything all together can really make huge strides when it comes to reducing risk. So Dr. Funk, thank you so much for taking the time. You are wildly busy and we are so grateful to you for being here today. And
The
thank
pleasure
you.
is all mine.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. We're so honored that you have taken the time out of your day to be with us. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.